The guy thought that the Solminati Academy was a place where young people from the continent gathered. Each student has their own ambitions which they want to achieve. Here they reveal their potential. This place has a meritocratic system. If you don't reach the level, you will be expelled. The guy looked up at the sky. He was lying on the ground and reasoned that his name was Nozomu Bounty. He's been here for 2 years now. Nozomu closed his eyes as the wind picked up which tousled his hair. Nozomu thought that 2 years ago he entered this academy, together with his childhood friends. They left everything behind without regret, in order to be here. He went on to say that his best friend from an early age is Ken Nodes. The other was none other than Lisa Hounds. Before they got to the academy, they were inseparable. Nozomu thought that one day, she and her parents came to their small village. The girl was walking to the river to the guy who was fishing on the bridge. The guy thought that their village was located on the outskirts of a small country. They have friendly relations with the neighboring kingdom. It was a small farming village with relatively fertile land, so they had no shortage. However, every day passed sluggishly. The girl finally approached the boy. She watched him cast a fishing rod to catch a fish. She screamed excitedly and asked with interest what he was doing. The boy turned his head and looked at her in surprise. He even got distracted from the fish he was holding in his hand. The girl blushed and looked at the guy amiably. She looked with her big eyes into the guy's eyes. The boy blushed at the attention. He did not expect at all that such a beautiful and sweet girl would approach him. The boy cried out in embarrassment. He chuckled awkwardly and asked with interest what she was asking him. The girl confidently shouted that yes, of course he had. The girl smiled broadly and said that if it wouldn't be a big problem for him. She asked if she could stay here and chat with him. That's right, her name is Lisa Hounds, nice to meet you. Nozomu thought that she was a girl who had been traveling with her mother for a long time. Her father died unexpectedly, and her mother decided that the best choice would be to return to a small village and raise Lisa here. The boy asked that she was a traveler. She was in a breathtaking place. Nozomu thought that her father was an adventurer. Adventurers are people who travel all over the world. He went on to argue that they were pioneers of new lands. This is always associated with extreme danger. Adventurers always go in groups and everyone must have a special ability. Nozomu thought that for someone like him at that time, there was no desire to take risks for the sake of adventure, but since he is a boy, it is natural that he dreamed of getting into the stories about the heroes of the past. So Lisa's story, told about her father, captivated him. Lisa laughed out loud at some guy's joke. Nozomu looked at the girl with a smile. His gaze betrayed all the tenderness with which he treats her. Nozomu thought that even though it was their first meeting, they lost a thread of time sharing stories about heroes they never dreamed of becoming in the near future. Their relationship began with friendship, but they turned into teenagers and they became more than just friends. Lisa and Nozomu have grown up. They met on the bridge as in childhood. The girl said that she decided that she was going to the Solminati Academy. Nozomu looked at her in surprise and thought that she wanted to leave the village and travel like her father. The guy pressed his lips into a thin line. He excitedly said that then. Nozomu paused to consider his answer. He confidently told her to let him go with her. The girl looked at him in surprise. Lisa screamed in shock that he was serious now. The girl anxiously asked what about his family. She was very concerned about this topic. She wanted to know the answer to her question. Nozomu thought she was right. He came from an ordinary farming family and he is their only son. So in their eyes, he was irreplaceable. His father will most likely knock out his teeth and pull out his nails for such a desire. The guy closed his eyes to collect his thoughts. He looked at Lisa and confidently shouted that if the girl of his dreams wanted her dreams to come true, then he would support her and go with her. Lisa looked at him in shock. She blushed and asked that he was doing this for her. Nozomu blushed and the girl looked at him in embarrassment. She closed her eyes and began to cry. Lisa smiled and gratefully said that thank you, she's so happy. The girl walked up to him and bumped into his chest. The girl buried her face in the guy to express her joy. They kissed. At that moment they were very happy. Nozomu was currently recalling this moment. He blushed at his thoughts. The guy sighed and said that he was dreaming again. The guy thought that this country was in turmoil because of the invasion of demons. These days, even after 20, they look back at it as the last human confrontation. Even to prevent such madness in the future, this academy was opened. The school was built by the joint efforts of all the authorities of the continent. All states are developing schools. Nozomu thought that they accept everyone regardless of their social status. They are based only on your grades, so if you make an effort or have an innate talent, you can stay as long as the mandatory requirements are met. After graduation, you can ensure a good life. He went on to argue that, however, if you start falling behind in academic performance like him, everyone's starting to think you're an outcast. He was once the best in his class, and now his peers look up to him. Nozomu thought it was true that everything depends on your social status. Your rights to be here are based on the grades displayed on these magic icons. The black badge is the lowest rank among all 10. The guy was walking through the corridors. The students were whispering about what was wrong with this guy. I haven't ruled him out yet, but he's still here. Some girl said that she thought such a weak student should be expelled right now. Nozomu walked up to his desk and noticed a large number of insults written on it. Some of the inscriptions were old, and some were only written. He looked away at the group of guys who were mocking him. The students shouted why he wouldn't just give up. Because he's among them, they look like a joke, he should just leave. Nozomu bit his lip angrily. Some guy screamed that he was just a splinter that couldn't be removed. The guy looked wearily in front of him but said nothing. Nozomu sat down at his desk. The guy called him garbage and mockingly said that he came back to class, but why did he do it, for what? He's useless, he just needs to leave. It's beyond his strength. The guy turned his head and noticed the group. 3 guys stopped in front of Nozomu. Their head is Mars Dickens, who grinned when he approached Nozomu. Nozomu thought that this was a student who was not holding back because of his hot temperament. He picks a fight with anyone who annoys him. Everyone becomes a target regardless of rank. From the moment he became a lower rank, he's his main target. Mars stared at the guy who was minding his own business and not paying attention to them. The guy made an angry face and looked at Nozomu with displeasure. One of the guys leaned over to Nozomu and said that it looked like this kid didn't want to talk. Of course, even his red-haired princess left him. However, this guy just doesn't want to forget this tiny, unfulfilled dream. Nozomu looked fiercely in front of him. The students laughed at him. Nozomu pursed his lips in anger. Suddenly, Mars pushed him, shouting that he dared to ignore him. The guy fell off his seat and dropped all his books. Nozomu sat down on the floor. He didn't react to the guy's actions in any way. Mars ran towards him with his fists. He was going to hit him. Suddenly, the door opened and a man entered. The man furiously asked the guy what he thought he was doing now. Mars said, startled, that it was all right, Mr. Henry Var. He doesn't want to be unpleasant at all. Nozomu got up and began to put his desk back in place. Mars said that he was just giving this loser instructions. He understands that he can handle it. Henry stood in front of his desk and said it didn't matter. They have to sort out their business after class. They're just stupid. They are wasting valuable time. The teacher looked at Mars and said with displeasure that he should land in his place. The guy did not move away from Nozomu's desk. He just stood there. Mars said that he was thinking about silencing the stupid teacher. He doesn't need to shout for him to hear. Henry furiously asked that he was stupid. If he was stupid, he can only imagine what kind of abomination he would have been taught. Mars looked at the teacher with a sly smile and chuckled. He said that he thinks he's not right in the head since he's been teaching black-rank students for so long. He looked at Nozomu a little more. Mars did not get the long-awaited reaction from him, so he went to his place. He won't leave it just like that. Henry clicked his tongue in displeasure and told Mars to come into his office after class, and now they can start class. He opened the book and put his hand on the right page. The teacher said they know. Magic is the process of strengthening one's own mental strength. By training their mental powers, they will be able to skillfully handle magical elements to create various effects. Mania can be used to enhance the body or environment. He said that by using magic that affects the world around, a huge number of magical elements are used. Usually such magic is called ritual. Originally, ritual magic was used as an appeal to the gods to summon rain for the harvest. Henry went on to say that, however, ritual magic is one of 2 modern magical methods. The other is the magic of the word. It is used as a method of spell formulation. The guy wrote something on the blackboard and said that tomorrow's lecture would be aimed at studying ritual magic. They experiment with different types of catalysts to achieve specific magical results. So they should be ready for tomorrow's lesson. Henry said that Nozomu Bounties is exempt from participation. Since he barely reaches the black rank, it would be a waste of time. The guy said that he would. The teacher exhaled and said that it was fine, but he would stand aside. He should keep away from the rest of the students. The students started laughing at the guy. Henry shouted loudly for him to shut up. He doesn't want to hear it from them. He will be honest with them. The difference between them is minimal at best. They all wear useless black-painted badges. Nozomu lowered his head. Nozomu thought that the cross-haired princess. Lisa got this nickname for the highest scores and skills at the academy. She rose to the highest rank very quickly, and no one stood in her way when he was her lover. He had to match her and strive for perfection. The guy thought that, however, he could not live up to the expectations that were placed on him. First of all, he was never smart enough. Secondly, he had never held a sword in his hands before entering the academy. He had never had the excitement Lisa had. He thought that he didn't even realize how great the demands in this school were. No wonder he was behind everyone. The expectations were unrealistic, but he never gave up. He kept moving, even thought he could handle it. He didn't want to give up. Nozomu thought that he had friends and a girl who wanted to help him, but most of all, he wanted to keep his promise to Lisa. He still wants to be useful to her. The guy continued to argue that he wants to become stronger. However, it doesn't make sense now. He felt like a butterfly flying near a spider's web. Nozomu thought that then something happened to him. His constant development has stopped. The people around him became more hostile, and this gave rise to daily mockery. He went on to reason that he couldn't perfect his abilities. It was as if huge chains had bound him. However, Lisa was on his side. She increased the amount of training with him, with the certainty that he will start progressing again. Nozomu thought that Lisa wanted to be on his side, so he started to put in even more effort. That summer, during their first year at the academy, they became as close as ever, but it all ended abruptly. Lisa said furiously that they needed to stop. He's just helpless, so goodbye. She quickly ran away. Nozomu was shocked to think that she never showed her anger, she always supported him. Nozomu looked after her in shock. The guy thought that without warning. Rumors spread that he had cheated on Lisa with another woman. The guy continued to argue that he denied all the accusations. He would never have done that to Lisa, but of course no one believed him, everyone condemned him. He thought that they had given her the nickname the red-haired princess, as it reflected her beauty and skills. While he was a loser with no future, when rumors spread throughout the school, everyone began to treat him like garbage. Nozomu thought that from that moment on he didn't have a single friend. No one to chat with. Many joined in the constant bullying of him, and some even used physical force against him. He continued to reason that he was trying to talk to Lisa. She just gave him a look filled with hatred. Until then, the guy stopped thinking. Nozomu gathered his thoughts and thought that he had attended a class and trained hard. He wanted to keep his vow, which he had made to Lisa in their place. The guy thought that his childhood best friend was Ken Nodes. They were of the same rank as him, but now he has the highest height. He is calm and polite. He often took part in his and Lisa's training sessions. Nozomu was walking along a small street. He looked battered and tired. Suddenly he stopped and looked ahead in surprise. Lisa walked arm in arm with Ken and smiled broadly. The guy went on to say that he had heard from other students that he had taken care of Lisa while she was heartbroken. Naturally, they started dating soon after. Nozomu thought he was upset at first, seeing her smiling happily next to him. Even during training, these two defeated all the other pairs in mock battles. He watched as the couple high-fived each other and began to discuss something. The guy thought tensely that everything had become clear to him. There was no place left for him in her heart. The students came to the field to practice on dolls. Henry said that today there will be pair training fights. However, they have the right to win partners for themselves. He will appoint them at his discretion and no excuses. He went on to say that they could use any amount of physical and magical power at their discretion. He also allows the use of chi, an oriental style of magic, as well as just magic. Nozomu thought that chi is aimed at improving the strength and flexibility of your body. At that time, magic requires incredible efforts to see at least some effect. He thought that both forms of magic were only used within the Arkmal continent. Goral, built by the director of the Solminati Academy, Arkazame. This is the frontier of magical research. Mars came forward and shouted to Nozomu that there was a loser here. He said with a smile that it looked like they were partners with him, they should get it over with. The guy looked at him intently. Mars grabbed his huge sword that was hanging on his back. He waved them sharply, causing a loud whistle to be heard. Nozomu walked away a bit. The guy thought that their school uniform was designed for fighting. It also had basic spells engraved on it. But there is nothing unusual for students to wear additional layers of armor for protection. Nozomu began to pull out his sword with the idea that his choice was to use this unique sword. It was created in the country on the islands. The guy always chooses him. He went on to argue that a katana is a sword specialized in slashing and stabbing an opponent. When the sword is used by a master, it can easily cut through steel bars. Nozomu thought that, however, it was unusual for Jelly to use such a weapon. It is not common on the continent and is relatively difficult to find. The guy thought that this kind of weapon suits him the most. It is difficult for him to rely on any magical improvements, so mastery of this sword is his advantage. Nozomu thought that with this weapon he had a chance to improve his abilities. If he can't use magic, he should focus on ordinary techniques. Mars asked that he would fight. He furiously said that it wasn't that it was important, but he was just useless. Fighting with him is just a waste of his precious time. Nozomu glared at him. Henry shouted loudly for them to stop talking. It was time for them to start fighting. Mars quickly ran towards Nozomu with his huge sword. The guy took a stance to defend himself. Mars jumped up with a loud cry and began to fall on the Nozomu. The guy put his sword on top and quickly began to deflect blows one by one. He was trying to stay in one place. Nozomu stared at the guy. It was very hard for him to resist. He managed to throw the sword aside with a loud shout. He really wants to win. Their swords hit each other with a loud clang. Nozomu held the sword of Mars with his blade. They stared at each other. Mars was strong enough, which made it very difficult for Nozomu to hold on. Nozomu glared at him. He felt like he couldn't handle it. Mars shouted with a smile that he was too slow. He waved his hand and raised it above his head. Mars tried to punch the guy. Nozomu noticed this and managed to crouch down to dodge. His opponent managed to swing his sword, which Nozomu did not expect at all. Nozomu moved away from him to get ready. Mars grabbed his sword more comfortably and ran towards the guy with a loud shout. He was going to beat him. He's very tough-minded. Nozomu ran to meet him with a loud shout. They began to fight each other quickly. The sound of swords striking each other could be heard. Mars began to strike furiously. He put all his hatred into them. Nozomu ran away from the blow. He wants to hit from the bottom, but Mars foresaw it. Mars hit Nozomu with great force. The guy managed to put the sword in front of him, which protected him, but he was still thrown back. He rushed forward. Mars shouted furiously that this was all he could do. They should have finished it by now. He should just give up. Nozomu thought tensely that it was chi. He thought that magic that uses life force in return increases physical abilities. Mars took advantage of just this ability. Mars quickly ran at him. He raised his sword over his bare chest to stab Nozomu. The guy looked at him intently. He quickly moved to leave. Mars clicked and shouted loudly that he probably needed to be taught. Nozomu crouched down a bit to keep his balance. He looked at his opponent intently. Mars quickly rushed forward with a loud shout. Nozomu stared at him intently and gripped his sword tightly. The lights began to fight each other quickly. No one wanted to lose. The guy started attacking Nozomu more and more. He tried his best to fight back. It was very difficult for him, but he did not give up. He was completely focused. Nozomu began to step back. He did not stop attacking his opponent. He clenched his teeth in anger. Mars screamed furiously at him to get out of his sight. They began to fight faster and faster. Nozomu defended more than he attacked. He couldn't get ahead, but he doesn't want to get hit a lot by himself either. Chains from the power of Mars began to appear on Nozomu's hands. He couldn't move his arms anymore. Suddenly, Mars hit Nozomu right in the stomach, and the guy flew away from him. Nozomu gathered himself and managed to grab his sword. He headed for Mars, and they started fighting again. Mars made a furious face during the battle, but Nozomu did not show any emotions. Nozomu got hit. He ran back a bit and raised his sword up. Mars screamed furiously for him to just disappear and die already. The guy looked at him wearily. He put the sword forward for protection when suddenly it broke. Mars hit him with his giant sword. Nozomu flew high into the air from the impact. He dropped the sword hilt that was left after the battle. The guy fell to the ground. Mars shouted in displeasure that this was a failure. He's just an annoying insect. Nozomu coughed loudly. He managed to open his eyes a little and heard that this fight was useless. He lost consciousness. Nozomu woke up screaming that he was in a lot of pain. He clutched his stomach and curled up into a ball. The guy managed to open his eyes and saw that he was covered with a blanket. He sat up and realized that he was lying on the bed. He sighed in surprise. A girl was sitting at the table in front of him doing something. Nozomu didn't expect him to be here. The guy looked at his body and thought, what is it? The girl turned to him and asked that he had already woken up. Nozomu thought that this woman was a school teacher, Norn Altena. He thought that he was already used to it. Norn said she had already finished his back and chest. Besides that, he has other complaints. He replied that he was not, just a little dizzy. He thought that life was filled with pain. Nozomu said that thanks again for her help. The guy thought that he was constantly in the infirmary. He is deeply indebted to Miss Altena. Norn sighed and said with a smile that of course he was here to help every student. She begged him not to worry about it but to rest. Suddenly the door opened loudly. A girl ran into the room screaming so that Altenia would know she was here. The girl anxiously asked how he was feeling. Norn and Nozomu looked at her in surprise. The guy thought it was Henry Var. She is the head of the 10th grade at the academy. She's a very nice girl. Norn told Henry that she had already told her several times. She is very fond of calling her Altena while they are at the academy. The girl sighed in surprise. The guy thought that they were obviously good friends outside the academy. Henry said with a smile that there was no one there, everything was fine. Altena pointed at the guy and said that he was here. She knows how she feels when they call her that. Henry leaned over to the guy and excitedly asked how he was feeling. Nozomu excitedly replied that yes, he was fine. He added awkwardly that she was too close. Nozomu blushed and looked away. She awkwardly asked if she could move away a little. The girl sighed in surprise. She was really worried about him. Altena tiredly told Henry that he would be fine. He has a couple of bruises on his chest and back, as well as a slight concussion, but the pain should subside soon. They heard loud conversations and shouted. The guy and the girls looked out the window. The students dispersed and chatted about their business. Nozomu chuckled and said that it looked like the lessons were over. Nozomu strapped a sword to his clothes. He went to the exit and shouted that thanks to Norn and Henry, now he has to go. Henry shouted for him to stop. She hadn't finished examining him yet, she needs to ask questions. Henry excitedly asked why he still went to the forest. Nozomu sighed in surprise and replied that yes. The guy did not expect such a question, and Henry looked at him worriedly. She shouted that it was dangerous to walk alone. Even knights have problems there. Maybe he should find other students and go together. The guy said he was asking for forgiveness. Nozomu ran out shouting that he was fine. If they let him, he just leaves. Henry reached out to grab him. She shouted for him to stop, but the guy wouldn't listen to her. Norn said he just left. Henry shouted in displeasure at him not to run away when his teacher was talking to him. She is very angry at his behavior now. Because of the incident, Nozomu feels like the weakest in the class. He is constantly ridiculed. It all started from the moment he showed his ability in his first year of study. What kind of abilities? These are special skills that any creature can show. To this day, the Academy still does not know the reason why people have abilities. There are an incredible number of abilities, and each of them has a number of advantages. The Nozomu ability is a suppressive ability. This is a very rare ability. She doesn't give him any advantages, she hinders him rather than helps him. Although he can still apply power-ups when using items, chi magic, but these power-up effects are too weak. His ability is constantly holding him back. As long as it exists, everyone with this ability has a permanent debuff in practice. Nozomu's ability constrains his physical abilities. Norn said that Nozomu always leaves after his wounds are healed. He goes God knows where and always returns crippled. Every time he comes back, she asks where he's been. He always replies that he went to the forest alone. She added that thanks to Henry, he gradually starts talking to her more and more, but his behavior is changing. Henry said she was sure she could break his mental barrier. She needs to keep an eye on him. The girl went on to say that they said teachers and students can't be more than teachers and students. She doesn't believe it's true, but she can't help him when it comes to magic. She can only help him with the technique. She said she wasn't a swordsman, but there was a moment when he almost got the advantage with his magic and chi at the same time. But the fight was painful to watch. Also, rank 10 is inherent in almost all high-level adventurers or someone equal to them. They all exude a very strong aura, as well as very powerful ones. While he may not be trained, his skills seem to be far beyond those of other students. They just need to be refined. Nora said she knows his body is well trained. His proportions are almost perfect, and he doesn't have a hint of excess weight. After a thorough examination, it is fashionable to say that he has quite strenuous workouts. Plus, he has a lot of scars all over his body, and she's sad to see him like this. Nora looked down at the floor and said sadly that this is why she often finds herself thinking that she wants to quit this job. She feels depressed. Henry asked why she was saying that. Nora replied, as a doctor, it hurts her to see such a young man go through such torment. What she's trying to say is that all these coincidences are not normal at all. Henry asked that it still seemed that he was determined to achieve something. It was wrong. Nora replied that no, not at all, but she thought he was at the limit of his height. Nora said that despite all the things they teach him here, at school with all the training, she wonders if there is anything else that only he can achieve alone. The Spasm Forest is a place that is home to the Solminati Academy. It is a dense forest in the middle of Arkhazam. It is almost impassable, the trees are very close to each other. A huge number of plants grow in these places. There are students and ordinary residents who live by hunting monsters and gathering resources. On the one hand, a rich forest can be a blessing for people. But on the other hand, this forest is also home to ferocious predators. Every year, several people disappear without a trace in this forest, who will no longer be seen. The Great Arkhazam was built about 10 years ago. The Solminati Academy is located in the center of the city, surrounded by the surrounding areas. It is considered part of the city of Arkhazam. As already mentioned, the academy is located in the center. Nozomu studies there, as well as all the other more outstanding students. In the northern part, there are political and administrative institutions responsible for the management of the city. Only aristocrats and high-ranking employees are allowed into this area. In the east, there is an area for the civilian population. There are student dormitories here. In general, this is the place of life for all residents of the city. There are a lot of people here. The southern part is considered a shopping area. Arkhazam is unique in that its markets sell all kinds of rare goods from all over the world. This is literally the daily bread of the economy. The Travelers Guild is also located in the south. In the west, there are various workshops, from blacksmith shops to weaving shops. It is here that artisans from all over the world gather to hone their skills and practice. There is a road that runs through all areas of the city. The rest of the area around the city is surrounded by dense forests. This forest is known as the Spasm Forest. It occupies a huge territory. From the outside, it looks literally like a sea of trees. It is also called the Lost Forest, as people regularly disappear in it. Before the city was built here, it was the border located between the Kramazian Empire and the Kingdom of Huorsuan. Therefore, it turned out to be a neutral territory that no one controls. There are powerful magical beasts roaming the forest. They usually don't show up near the city or near roads. They are hiding in areas of the forest. Nozomu was fighting with some long-haired girl. She was very skilled with her sword. The girl constantly struck and the guy had to defend himself. He holds his sword with both hands with confidence and determination. The girl swung at the guy, who was already pretty tired. The guy began to step back gradually. The girl looked at him intently. She made a fist and complained that it wasn't enough. She hit him with all her might. The guy screamed in pain. He fell to the ground and rolled quickly. The guy jumped up sharply to deflect the girl's blow. She didn't expect this at all and looked at him in surprise. Nozomu shouted furiously. The guy quickly rushed forward. He ran quickly past the girl, who did not have time to react. Nozomu used a lightning strike of chi, which he did pretty well. The girl turned her head a little and stared at the guy. She thought it was magic that provided acceleration to the speed of lightning. She ran quickly and found herself right in front of Noz, who jerked in surprise. The girl said with a smile that he was too slow to win. The girl quickly swung her sword to strike at the guy. He rolled his eyes in shock. He already thought he had outsmarted her. Chi is a ghost sword, a ghostly blow created from compressed and dense chi. The girl tried to hit him, but the guy managed to squat down and avoid the attack. She raised her sword high to attack Nozomu again. He thought that even though it was a fairly simple technique, the guy looked at her intently. The impact was so strong that she also hit the trees. Nozomu thought that since the attack is created by compressed chi energies, it is incredibly difficult to foresee. She cut off the tops of 3 trees that stood nearby at once. The girl went to Nozomu. The guy braced himself to deflect the blow. He thought it was a unique attack at an incredible speed. The girl hit him with her sword, but Nozomu hit her back. They deflected each other's blows and none of them were injured. The guy thought that in a second the sword passes a dozen meters. The swords began to make a loud grinding noise as they rubbed against each other. Nozomu glared at the girl and shouted loudly that the teacher. The girl looked collected and confident. Nozomu glared at the girl. He asked loudly that she wanted to kill him. The guy was very angry at the teacher, and he was also tired of their long battle in the forest. The girl said that, to be honest, if she wanted to kill him, she would have taken him down even when he was trying to escape. He was in the palm of his hand. If he dodges like that, he's going to end up badly. She added that if this was a real battle to the death, she would not hesitate to finish him off. Nozomu looked at her with displeasure. He really wanted to win. His teacher pushed him hard. She swung her sword to throw the guy off balance. Nozomu shouted furiously that this was a failure. He quickly pushed off and ran quickly. The girl raised the sword above her head and stared at Nozomu. The guy grabbed his sword and stood up a little from the ground to be at the chest levels of the teacher. Nozomu tried to attack her with his sword. He made a sudden movement so that the teacher would not have time to react. She sighed loudly and quickly stepped aside. The guy shouted in shock what was going on. He threw his sword on the grass as he did not have time to stop the blow. Nozomu felt the metal on his skin. The girl touched him lightly with her sword and said that this was how he was killed. The teacher looked at him intently. She put her sword away and put her foot on his sword. Nozomu was breathing heavily. He was very tired of the battle that ended with him losing. He said he was giving up. The guy thought it was Shino. The woman in front of him is his secret teacher. Before building the city, she came to these forests to improve her skills. Nozomu stood up and said he wasn't done yet one more time. Shino said he was in too much of a hurry. He has to take something out of defeat. He said that only someone like her could react at such close range. Shino said that anyone can do it. His last attack was only a half-hearted attempt. Naturally, she foresaw his weakness. In fact, she could feel the movements of his body. The girl said that was enough for today. It was getting dark. In any case, it's almost dinner time. He had to get them something to eat. Shino pointed her finger at the felled trees. Nozomu tiredly attached the sword to his clothes. Disappointed, he said that of course, for his teacher anything. The guy felt depressed. Shino asked loudly what it meant that he would get her anything she asked for, right? Nozomu excitedly said what she was saying. It was absurd. The teacher looked at the guy intently. She smiled slyly because she had already planned something. Nozomu shuddered and thought that he should leave before she really killed him. He sighed wearily. The guy quickly ran away. He skillfully jumped over the roots of the trees to get on the path. Shino looked after him and thought that even if little by little, his progress was visible. She thought that her first encounter with Nozomu had taken place in a rather dangerous part of the forest. The animals in this area are quite ferocious, so ordinary people don't usually walk here. She thought she was looking around and was attracted by the distinct sound of a sword swinging. Then she saw him training alone. He became curious, and she watched him from the shadows for a while, but she began to notice what a terrible state he was in. Shino thought he looked pale and lifeless. The skin on his arms was torn and hung in shreds. Due to his inflamed joints, he lost his balance every time he swung his sword. He was torturing himself. He didn't eat well. She shouted that it was pointless to train like that. Nozomi replied that he didn't care, he had to get stronger. His first love left him and everyone treats him terribly. He wants at least others to stop bullying. The guy added that therefore, until he gets respect, he can't go home. He has to train, but he has no future. His abilities are improving. They can't improve. Shino was shocked to think that he was killing himself just for the sake of respecting others. They must be cruel to him if he acts so desperately. He looks just awful. The girl excitedly thought that when she saw those lifeless, clouded eyes. She remembered a beggar dying of the city, whom she met while leaving her hometown, however. Shino began to leave quickly. She thought hard that she should try not to think about it, but the same look that So Young has, it tears her from the inside out. The guy shouted loudly that this was a nuisance. Shino ran back and thought they were demonic dogs. They're chasing the boy. The monster bit his leg. She thought that they were like ordinary dogs, but they ate human flesh. Like demons, they were of low rank, but nevertheless, they could quite kill someone with one bite. Shino continued to argue that they could easily take this child's life. These demonic dogs must seem to him in his condition as dangerous as dragons. She dealt with the dogs and said that she would help such a weakling. What he got himself into. It seems like he has a dying wish, but if he really wants to die, at least he has to die like a warrior. Nozomi looked at her and asked how the warrior was. Shino replied with a smile that it was. He may die after learning to use his sword properly. Shino said that about 1.5 years had passed since that day. She's been trying to teach him ever since. He became quite ferocious. She still remembers his look. She thought it was a ghost sword. In the concept, a sharp blow of compressed chi will be performed, which flies at the enemy. The technique itself is considered basic, but a true master can turn even the most basic skill into a deadly weapon. Shino continued to argue that she, with this technique alone, can kill any opponent. In fact, her sword is so sharp that it can cut through an iron pot like a piece of paper. She thought that although Nozomu's sword was inferior to hers in strength, his sword was as sharp and dense as hers. If you think about it, considering that his abilities are sealed, it's only a matter of time for him to surpass her. The girl reasoned that with such strength, she was sure the reason he couldn't get stronger in the academy was the suppression of abilities that schools focus on. Shino thought that although the skills she had taught him were very powerful and focused on attention, she forced him to focus on swordsmanship rather than controlling chi to compensate for his shortcomings. She said that they are very difficult to use in training battles at the academy. If he wants to show his true strength, he must first master many different ways to use these chi skills, but he must build physical strength. She thought that's what they were living for and getting stronger. Nozomu's heart had already been broken once. It is obvious that by ruthless training he wants to escape from reality. It is obvious that he is trying to escape from himself. In addition, this is the main reason for his social phobia. In other words, he deliberately runs away from everyone. Although he does not say that this is wrong, but once escaping from reality and finding himself in another, it is almost impossible to return back. Shino thought that was why she decided it was better to help him. She decided to call their training an escape. Although he is hardly good enough to teach Nozomu as his student, but so. The girl thought that she could rest easy knowing that she had given him everything she had learned over the years, so when she would really leave her. Nozomu, she hopes that he will break free from the bonds that bind him. Nozomu ran through the forest with the idea that you can't even eat these mushrooms, while he saw nothing but rats. He turned his head and thought it was an explosion. People rarely come here. He went on to argue that magic is a general term for energy using spirit-based powers. Spiritual power is usually used. This analog of chi has been around for centuries. The guy thought that judging by the sounds, they were fighting with a bestial demon. He's different from the demonic dogs he used to fight. He thinks it's worth going and taking a look. Nozomu hid in the bushes and saw 2 bears. He thought they were demonic bears. They don't usually go in twos, so these are probably brothers. The guy continued to argue that this special red hair is not to be confused with anything. Besides, they say she's as strong as a shield. The bears themselves are a B-rank threat to capture one. A particularly high rank is needed. He thought tensely that it would take at least 5 people like him. The bear growled loudly and threw forward. A dark-haired girl with a sword appeared. The girl hit the bear on the head. The monster screamed loudly and growled. She stabbed him right in the eyes. Nozomu thought that he had seen her before. They seemed to be in the same course, but her rank was several times higher. The girl hit the bear in the place where his heart is located. Nozomu thought she was one of the best in their class. The bear screamed loudly, and the girl made the last blow in his life. The girl looked at the second monster. Nozomu thought that she was called the Princess of the Night because of her hair as black as the night sky. Her name is Iris Dina Franshield. The bear growled loudly. Suddenly, a second girl came out. She excitedly shouted that she was summoning a gust of wind. She asked to let her hear his call, and now the flight. Nozomu thought it was Thelma Lime. She's a famous magician at the academy. By her strength alone, she already surpasses the teachers of the academy. Iris shouted at Thelma to be careful. She waved her staff and screamed loudly. The girl released a huge stream of wind that can blow away everything in its path. She is really very strong. The girl cut up the bear. Nozomu thought it was a whirlwind of wind. A magic spell that creates a whirlwind of wind that warms the opponent through, refers to medium-level spells. He looked at the remains of the bear and excitedly thought that she was also called the Singer of the Four Winds. The guy was amazed by the strength of the two young girls. Nozomu thought that Iris Dina Franshield and the infamous but powerful magician, they were both definitely the best students of the academy. How much effort had she spent to bring down this demon? The technique she used. He continued to reason that it was incredibly powerful, even without any transformations and chi enhancers. She must have tremendous magical power. Even her simple magic skills are so powerful. Where do people get so much strength from? Suddenly the bear growled loudly. The sound came from the forest itself. Nozomu sighed in surprise. He didn't understand what was going on. He noticed a surprised Thelma who couldn't move from shock. The bear ran out of its hiding place. Nozomu ran at him without hesitation. The monster was approaching Thelma, who was standing in a pillar and did not react in any way. Iris used her skills and hit the bear. The monster hesitated a bit when it felt the pain. Nozomu looked at him in surprise. He did not expect this. The guy thought it was an instant throw. Iris has a unique ability to attack without using spells. Nozomu quickly pulled out his sword. He shouted loudly to release some of his energy. The guy ran up to the huge bear and hit it with all his might. He cut not only the bear but also a nearby tree. The bear growled one last time and fell to the ground. Nozomu thought what they hadn't noticed was that there were actually 3 bears, which was why the girl was in danger. The girls shouted in surprise what had happened. Nozomu breathed heavily and thought that he himself did not know why he rushed to them, but now there was no need to ask questions. He only had a split second. Nozomu continued to reason that it was practically no different from his own ghost sword. But if you compare their power level, the master's level is head and shoulders above his. He thought that Chi's abilities should be taken seriously. Because of his suppressed abilities, everything he does turns out to be very weak. Besides, his body still hadn't recovered from the training battle with his skill. Thelma looked at her friend in surprise, who went to the guy. She excitedly screamed that she was asking for forgiveness. She didn't notice it, but thank you so much for your help. She leaned towards him and excitedly said that she would take a look. Iris asked if he was hurt. Nozomu looked at the beautiful face of the girl in surprise and replied that no. Iris said loudly that it was good, thanks for saving them. Thanks to him, she and her friend are now safe. Nozomu blushed at her words of gratitude. The girl added that thanks again. By the way, her name is Iris Dina Franshield. They are in the 2nd year of the Solminati Academy and even in the same group. Shino was watching their conversation. The blonde girl confusedly said that her name was Thelma Lalame. Nozomu looked at her in surprise. He did not expect that the girl would blush so much, and then she hid behind her friend's back altogether. Iris said she was sorry for her. She was a little timid, but she was still her best friend. Thelma excitedly said she was sorry, she was just shy. The girl added that especially around guys, honestly, it's not because of him. Nozomu awkwardly replied that everything was fine, it was okay. Iris asked who he was. She said that apparently he was also a student at the academy. Nozomu looked fearfully in front of him. He pressed his lips into a thin line of fear. He was scared. Nozomu thought that everyone who is at least something of themselves knows who he is. They can be kind to him now, but they can immediately turn their backs on him. The guy went on to argue that it was better for him not to tell them his name, but that's pretty rude. Nozomu closed his eyes to collect himself and exhale from the tension. He thought that Iris's family was one of the families who helped build Arkhazam. Besides, her father serves the royal family. More precisely, he is a long-time advisor to the kingdom of Forsina. Nozomu exhaled and said that he was a sophomore from the 10th rank group. His name is Nozomu Bounty. Iris looked at him and the guy quickly turned away. The girl said it was good. Let's just say she believes him, but wants to say that it's a little suspicious that a student with the 10th rank is wandering around all alone, so where is his company? Nozomu looked at the girls in surprise. He didn't understand what Iris meant. He calmed down and looked at Thelma's scared face, and Iris looked at him with interest. The guy awkwardly said that the company, he had no company. He's the only one here. Thelma cried out in surprise. She had not expected such an answer. Iris excitedly asked that one seriously. Nozomu thought that Iris and Thelma were the two most qualified A-grade students. Rank is the levels that are given to travelers on the Arkmal continent. It can be considered that this is an assessment of someone's skills. The guy continued to argue that victory over demonic beasts, performing special tasks, the creation of new research and innovative inventions, all this counts towards the rank. He thought that simply put, if you have the rank of A, then you are on a par with first-class rangers, royal knights, and court magicians. You can study science. Nozomu went on to argue that the only ones for whom the school approved the title were A-grade students in their second year. These are 5 unique students. They are amazing. He thought that even people with a higher rank were afraid of the threat of encountering demonic beasts. Nozomu said that on top of everything else, no one wants to work with someone like him. Iris said she didn't know why no one wanted to take him in. All students who are able to survive here are extremely rare, but despite all this, she added that he was all alone in the farthest part of the forest. The girl asked that he must have a reason for such actions. Nozomu stuttered back that he had come here to practice. He shouted that he knows that he can get stronger, and no matter how slowly it happens, he will be glad of it, but still he doubts that he can get stronger. But this does not mean that he should give up and die. The girls looked at him in surprise. Iris said that she understands, so she asks for forgiveness, but it still seems strange to her. Nozomu replied that no, everything is fine. He apologizes for being rude. The guy said that's why he wants to know how to address her. The girl excitedly shouted that Iris was just fine. After all, they're just students, there's no need for formalities. Nozomu looked at her excitedly and wanted to object, but the girl interrupted him. Iris said with a smile that no, the guy should stop, everything is fine. He replied that he was fine. The guy excitedly asked what the two of them were doing here. Apart from him, it's not usual for students to wander around here, so he's surprised. Iris said loudly that they had received a task from the guild, and that was why they had come here. Nozomu looked at her in surprise and asked what the task was from the guild. She added that they said they had seen a dragon. Nozomu thought that the dragon was a mythical creature that was considered the strongest of all living creatures. He asked what the dragon was. He thought that this species had extraordinary power. They say that in ancient times they once controlled all creatures. Everyone was very afraid of dragons. The guy thought that to top it all off, they say that whoever kills the dragon will get all its power. It is impossible to see a live dragon. Most of the living have never even seen his skeleton, and there are no stories about it either. Iris said that although no one believed the rumors, they couldn't help but check them out if there was a chance that there really was a dragon roaming around here. A dragon is a kind of demonic beast. The guy thought that because of all the advantages of the dragon, indecisive heroes don't have a chance. He said that he understood and would remember. Iris said with a smile that it was good. If this beast is really a dragon, even she can't fight. She asked him what materials he needed, even though they didn't cost a fortune, but she thought meat and wool could be sold at a good price. Besides, she owes him a favor, so he'll take them as thanks. Nozomu leaned over to the bear and said that perhaps he would take some meat. The girl asked if it was okay, they would be returning to the city and he. Nozomu replied that he thought he would be back tomorrow. Iris said with a smile that she understood. She thanks him again for his help. Thelma hid behind her friend and stammered that thank you for helping them. Nozomu took the materials and replied with a smile that there was no problem. He's going too. He begs them to be careful. The guy left and left the girls alone. Iris turned to her friend and said her name loudly. The girl told Thelma that she knows she doesn't get along with guys and all that, but she usually doesn't act so timid. What's the matter? Thelma replied that she was sorry, but they say that he cheated on Lisa and likes to play with girls. If she doesn't remember everything correctly, they grew up together and she fell in love with him, but he only needed her body. Iris turned and looked at the sky. The girl said loudly that all these rumors were going around about him, but she wasn't sure. She paused to find the right words. She said it didn't seem like he was capable of such terrible things. You can't tell from him that he can cheat on a girl. He seemed like a good man. Thelma excitedly said that in any case she was scared. Iris said that if they ever saw him again, she would be able to apologize. She shouldn't think about it too much. The girl said yes. Nozomu happily returned home. Shino said it was fine, someone was late. Maybe he felt that the opposite sex was dominating him. The guy asked in surprise why she was angry. Shino said that men only know how to interfere. You ask them to bring dinner, but he won't be able to. Nozomu thought it should be noted that she was in a bad mood. The next day, Shino tightened up his training. Iris returned home when it was already nightfall. She fell wearily onto the bed with her sword. She screamed her eyes and thought that his sword speed was incredible. It was such a simple, clear color. She looked at her sword and thought that mithril was a metal with a high affinity for magic. He is able to accumulate magic as a material for weapons. He is the best not only in strength, but also in flexibility. Iris thought that her sword was a gift from her father and the sword master when he first came here. They made it, given her habit of consuming magic, so that it would protect her better than any other weapon. The girl closed her eyes and continued to reason that it was engraved with silver wings of the evening star. She is very grateful for such a good sword. Iris left the sword on the bed and walked over to the saber. She picked it up and thought it was a magical sword, a lunar eclipse. This is the strongest attack he is capable of. She thought that chi and magic were called the sources of the soul. In fact, there aren't that many differences between them. If you look at it objectively, the strength of both depends entirely on the caster. Magic relies on the caster's spiritual state and their combined strength. Iris continued to reason that chi uses the caster's physical base. They both push each other away. This sword was made to neutralize their repulsive nature. Perhaps this sword can even cut through the scales of a dragon. The girl said that she would never succeed the way he did. She looked out the window and said, speaking of which, he didn't even go to the city. Even she wouldn't risk staying there overnight. Being on their territory at night seems like a bad action. The girl thought that he was so completely alone, and the animals were at the peak of their activity. Only the bad people stay there alone. Under normal circumstances, only those who are unaware of the danger would remain there. Iris remembered his face and thought that Nozomu Bounties. The girl smiled and excitedly asked what this guy was really like in life. Nozomi came out of the forest and covered the sky with his hands so that the sun would not blind him. He returned the next day around noon. The guy said that the sun is especially bright today. The guy saw how all the students communicate with each other. Someone was standing in line for delicious food that was being prepared right on the street. Nozomi stopped. He thought tensely that he was despised by the entire academy. There are too many people here, so he is very uncomfortable surrounded by other students. He does not want to go. Nozomi thought he didn't really want to have lunch in the park, but the school cafeteria was even worse. The guy went to the stall and bought himself a small bun. He thought that he also had money problems, which meant that he would have to make do with what he would get himself. Training in the morning was also twice as tough, so he didn't have much energy left for a normal lunch. Nozomi sat down under a tree and began to eat his bun. He said it could have been worse. Suddenly, the guy put down the food because he noticed the girl who was standing next to him. He looked at the girl and thought she was an Eclos student. Eclos is an auxiliary school directly connected with the academies of Solminati. She focuses on younger students, usually about 10 years old. Nozomi thought that their goal was to look for children who already showed signs of giftedness at a young age. School helps them develop their abilities while they are young. In general, high-ranking officials are elected to this school. It's not surprising that their children have some kind of gift. The guy looked at how the girl was running and thought that she was too small for an Eclos student. Maybe she stepped on something. He can't just leave her here, can he? Nozomi excitedly asked if she was okay. The girl turned and looked at him in surprise. The guy looked into her eyes and thought, what is it? He thought excitedly that he thought he had already seen someone very similar to her. Nozomi asked with interest that she was from Eclos, what she was doing here. The girl replied sheepishly that she was. She was playing with Tenka during her lunch break, but she looked away. Nozomi asked what was wrong with Tenka. She turned her head to the side. The guy saw a black cat playing with a beautiful bracelet. Nozomi asked what the bracelet was. The girl excitedly replied that yes, he was hers. She doesn't know why, but the shadow took him and dragged him up a tree. The girl screamed for the cat to come down. She really asks Tenka to come down. Nozomi looked at the top and thought that this tree was quite tall. The wood is also too smooth. The guy rolled up his sleeves and said that even he would find it difficult to climb on it. He said it was okay. In the forest, it is vital to be able to climb any trees to escape from monsters. Nozomi climbed a tree and looked at the cat, who was unhappy that he was disturbed. The guy thought that fortunately he specializes in climbing trees. Nozomi stretched out his hand and shouted loudly for him to give back the bracelet he had stolen. The shadow hissed loudly and growled at the guy. He is hostile against the man. The cat began to smear his paws to scratch the guy and prevent him from approaching the bracelet. In the end, he jumped with a loud roar and began to mock Nozomi's face, who screamed in pain. The guy grabbed the cat by the withers and shouted loudly for him to stop. The shadow clawed at Nozomi's hand. He shouted loudly for him to finally stop. The cat jumped out of Nozomi's arms and quickly ran away. The guy screamed loudly from the pain in his arm. He dropped his bread when he was trying to handle the cat. Tenek put a bracelet around his neck. The cat looked proudly at the guy who couldn't take the bracelet away from him. Nozomi glared at the animal. He said furiously that he had no lunch now. The guy got into a fight with an animal. Nozomu screamed that he had given him the bracelet. The shadow screamed loudly and growled at the man. The girl awkwardly asked that he was okay, they were fine there. Suddenly the branch on which Nozomu and the cat were sitting broke. The guy started falling down screaming what was going on. He fell to the ground, and the shadow managed to land in the girl's arms. Nozomu clutched his head and screamed that it hurt so much. The girl excitedly asked that he was all right. He replied that he did. The guy asked if the bracelet was okay. The girl looked at the cat that was cuddling up to her. She exhaled and said yes, it looked like it. The girl shouted with a smile that she was grateful for his help. Nozomu said that it was not difficult for him. The girl shouted that she had not introduced herself. With the whole story of the bracelet and the cat, they don't even know each other's names. She went on to say that her name is Samaliana, her friends call her Somia. The guy said that okay, his name is Nozomu Bounty, but you can just Nozomu. So she's a Somia, it's okay if he calls her that. Samia shouted joyfully that she is glad that he was here and helped her. Nozomu said that once again, you're welcome. He thought that for the first time in a long time someone was thanking him, mostly it was. The girl hugged the cat to her and smiled broadly, she was very happy. Nozomu looked at her joyful face and couldn't help but smile, he's glad he could help. Suddenly there was a loud ringing, they screamed at the same time. Samia screamed that there was no bell. The guy said it was better to hurry up. The girl bowed and shouted that yes, she had to hurry back, thanks again. Samia quickly ran back to school. Nozomu looked after her and smiled. He said wearily that this was how he was left without lunch and it didn't matter. Nozomu sat in the corner of the room and listened. Henry said that ritual magic is one of the oldest forms of magic. If they listen to him carefully and follow his instructions, they won't have any problems, but if they don't know how to use magic skills, then it will be difficult for them. The man pointed to a strange structure and said that it was a magical altar. Now they will all create their own altars. They can study the example carefully. Henry said that once they built the structure, he could use a spell to direct the magic power to the center. Then there should be a surge of magic. He went on to say that the power of the splash usually depends on the caster's natural magical abilities. The magic will be based on their spell. Whether it's a ray of light or a jet of water, it will react accordingly. The students began to draw circles to start completing the task. The correctness of the magic circle also has to do with the caster's skills. The circle is very important. It depends entirely on the caster's ability to do magic. Nozomu thought he couldn't imagine that feeling when using magic. Mars is a lucky guy, he has both chi and magic at a pretty good level. Nozomu went on to argue that people usually have either the ability to chi or magic. They are rarely evenly distributed. As in the case of Mars, there are very few people who are good at both. The probability is less than 1%. He thought that using them at the same time, this ability is even rarer. The students started talking, which is incredible. Before he joined the academy, he was a violent guy in the city. He's been in fights since he was a kid. Nozomu thought that because of his suppressed abilities, Nozomu did not take part in lectures on magic. He wishes that wasn't the case. Nozomu can't create magic skills, so he literally doesn't care, but now he wants to catch up. The guy turned away and thought that in class he was just watching and listening, not showing that he was not getting grades. Nozomu was watching the students closely. The academy focuses on students with outstanding talents, so they have a greater advantage. The higher the ability level, the more privileges you have. Students with high rank have much more opportunities. Even travelers are provided with their more significant supplies when taking their assignments. Nozomu looked at the arena in surprise. He saw a familiar girl, it turned out to be Iris, and with her another girl. The guy's eyes widened in shock. Nozomu looked at the blonde-haired girl who was smiling broadly. The guy couldn't take his eyes off her. Dumbfounded, he thought it was Lisa. He thought that the classes with different levels and their training places were clearly separated. He is a sophomore with the 10th rank. He hoped he would never run into her. The guy continued to reason that it had been more than a year since he had last seen her. Once they promised each other their future, but now everything is different. Nozomu looked at her intently. Lisa grabbed 2 knives and began to step on Iris. Suddenly, she quickly ran at her. The guy excitedly thought that she was fast. He looked at the face of Iris, who had used the magic of her sword. Nozomu tensely thought that he would counterattack with ghostly projectiles as fast as a bullet. Lisa screamed loudly and began to repel the girl's attacks. Nozomu excitedly thought that she was standing quietly. The girls stood opposite each other. They started attacking each other. Lisa was moving with great speed. Nozomu looked at Iris's face and thought that she had sustained Lisa's monstrous pace. Iris began to walk around the girl on the other side. She tightened her grip and began to attack Lisa. Nozomu thought that she was using her natural skills to dodge precise attacks. Lisa hit Iris first, screaming for her to get in. Nozomu looked into the girl's eyes and thought that it looked like Lisa had absolute superiority in battle. Nozomu looked at Lisa's quick punches. He thought excitedly that she was so confident with a sword. The guy is shocked by how strong and fast the girls are. The guy thought tensely that in that case if Iris had a chance. Lisa screamed loudly when Iris almost hit her. Shocked, Nozomu asked how did she attack like that? Iris created several magic balls. Nozomu thought that she could apply skills without spells as possible while fighting with a sword and casting a spell. Iris swung her sword. Nozomu thought that her sword must be unusual. She uses chains to attack her legs. At the same time, it blinds her with black mists. Lisa tries to repel the attack. She wields a sword so fiercely and uses magic just to distract herself. He continued to reason that they were blocking each other's punches without taking a single step back. Lisa's attacks create strong gusts of wind in the arena. During the attacks, she followed her own reflection. Lisa jumped back and landed on the ground. Nozomu sighed excitedly. He thought tensely that this was a ruthless struggle. She suddenly became distant. Suddenly, Lisa's aura became clear. She crossed her swords and they lit up brightly. She waved her hands and a huge amount of fire appeared. Nozomu thought it was magic. Flames attacked Iris. Lisa screamed that it was enough. Nozomu thought that this was not even the most powerful thing that magic could do. In strength, it is about the same as Thelma's gust of wind. Iris screamed furiously. She swung her sword and cut through the fire that Lisa had created. She has great power to be able to do this, it's amazing. Nozomu looked at the charred ground in shock. He said in shock that it was incredibly powerful. Where did she get such powers from? It's impossible. Lisa asked with a smile that she had been preparing for this attack for so long. Iris chuckled and replied that from the very beginning of our battle, she began to prepare at this moment. No went on to say that her attacks were ruthless and it took him longer to prepare for them. He had to focus on the battle. Otherwise, she could have defeated her. Lisa exhaled and smiled. She looked into Iris's eyes and said that she understood everything, then she would consider it a compliment. You can say that she was praised. Lisa turned her back on the girl and left the arena. Iris stared after her and waited for her to leave. She thought that this girl was Lisa Hound. Iris went on to speculate that she was Nozomu's ex-lover. And as she had heard, she was now dating his best friend named Ken Nodes. Ken handed Lisa the elixir. The girl smiled at him gratefully. Iris thought that she couldn't say that she knew them personally. Only fools judge people they don't know at all. Iris gripped the hilt of her sword and thought that if only she had carried out this attack earlier, the battle would have gone much better. She regrets that she didn't realize this sooner. She went on to reason that it usually takes her about 10 seconds to trigger this attack, but it took him less than a second how he does it. The girl noticed Nozomu in the window. The guy looked at her intently. Iris thought excitedly that he was here. She awkwardly raised her hand and waved at him. The girl blushed when she realized that Nozomu was here. Suddenly, Nozomu turned around and quickly left. Iris asked in surprise what had happened. She was shocked to think that he had just ignored her now. Thelma quickly ran up to her best friend. She handed her the elixir with a smile and told her to take it. Iris said thank you. The girl drank it quickly. They began to watch the next battle. Iris thought that she usually watches her classmates sparring from the sidelines. It gives her pleasure. Iris continued to reason that it had become her habit. She realized that if she could learn something by watching others fight, she could use it in her own training. She turned her head and looked out the window. She began to observe other students. The girl was trying to see a guy she knew. Thelma excitedly asked if something was wrong. Iris replied that no, nothing. Iris continued to watch the battles, but she couldn't stop thinking about Nozomu. She asked her friend if she could ask her something. Thelma replied that yes, what is it? Iris looked at Thelma and said she wanted to ask about Nozomu's ability. The girl grabbed her staff and looked at her friend in shock. Nozomu came out of the academy and thought why Lisa left him for Ken. Why he forces himself to go through this pain as if in some kind of game, why he can't get stronger. Why he just won't give in to the pain. The guy went on to argue that he couldn't find a single reason why he deserved all this. These chains bind him and prevent him from moving on. He came here even after a long quarrel with his father when he told him never to come home again. He thought that his decision was rewarded by this dual reality, where the pain in his heart eliminated itself and locked itself from the inside. I never thought that he would have such thoughts. He thought that he hadn't learned anything yet. He tried so hard that he even asked Lisa at what point everything went wrong, but she just looked at him with disgust. His heart couldn't take the pain anymore. Nozomu thought that he needed the help of a master to train even better. Over the past couple of years, he has developed a dangerous habit. He forces himself to train more ruthlessly. He thought it was the only protection left in his broken heart. He knows it's wrong, but only strict discipline can help him concentrate. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of him shouting for him to stop. Samia ran out of the bushes with her black cat. She was running fast on the grass when she suddenly slipped. The girl began to fall with a loud scream when suddenly the guy stretched out his hand. Nozomu caught the girl, who almost fell face first into the grass. He said in surprise that hello Samia. The girl turned her head in his direction and joyfully shouted that Nozomu was here. Samia pointed at the cat and said that this boy had escaped during her day practice. He must have noticed that the window was open and escaped. He's such a naughty boy. Nozomi bent down and looked at the cat. He straightened up and walked away saying that it was okay, since she was apparently all right, then he would go. The girl excitedly screamed for him to stop. The guy listened to her and looked at the girl with interest. Samia awkwardly said what she meant by that. She can see you tomorrow, she really wants to. Nozomi asked in surprise that she wanted to see him. The girl replied that he had helped her for the second time. She would like to thank him, besides, it was nice to talk to him longer. Samia looked at him pleadingly. Nozomi thought tensely that for the first time in a long time, someone had asked him to meet without the intention of offending him. He thought that if she communicated with him, she might be treated the same way as him. Besides, he really needs to go back and practice after lessons with the master. The girl asked what it was not. Samia looked sadly into the guy's eyes. Nozomi lowered his head and said that he couldn't after class so they could meet during lunch. Samia shouted joyfully, which is true, she is so glad. The girl shouted that she would see you tomorrow then. Nozomi stretched out his hand to stop the girl, but she had already run away. The guy told her to stop. He couldn't even say a word. This girl has so much energy. Night fell and Samia went out into the courtyard of her house. She stretched out her arms and said that the light of the sun reflected on the ground. The girl held out the letter E in displeasure. She managed to release some magic. The girl looked at the book and said why she was not as good as her sister. There's something wrong with her. The girl came down the stairs saying what she was talking about. She's doing great. Samia shouted joyfully that her sister was here. Her sister turned out to be Iris. At the moment, 6 elements are known. The most common are earth, wind, fire, and water. The other 2 are rare. They are known as light and darkness. A person's use of an element is determined by its connection with that element itself. The more complex the spell, the more important your compatibility with the elements is. Iris said she was having trouble with a certain spell. Samia showed the book and said that with this. The girl said that it's cool, light magic. It's not easy to start with this kind of magic. Iris said that the earth would shake and the slaves would carry the great fire. A bright ball appeared in her hand. Samia shouted in delight. Iris thought that the spell was based on a glow called lantern. Iris told her to try to focus on the speed of casting the spell. Light magic requires a lot of energy, but when she releases the magic and casts the spell correctly. Samia shouted joyfully that her sister was simply incredible. The girl tried to repeat what was not working very well. Iris pointed to the book and watched her try. Iris looked at her joyful sister and said with a smile that she had noticed that she seemed happier lately. Something very good happened to her. Samia shouted joyfully that she recently made a new friend. Iris asked with interest what he was like. The girl imagined Nozomu's face in her head. Samia said that he seemed very sad, as if he was constantly being tormented by something, but he was very kind. A couple of days ago, Shadow stole her bracelet and hid in a tree, and he climbed up a tree and returned it to him. Iris replied that she understood. She thought that he seemed to avoid communicating with people and was bothered by their conversations. He seems very sensitive, but he knows for sure that he is very kind. Otherwise, he wouldn't have helped her when she was in trouble. Samia excitedly asked what about her sister, how she was doing. The girl replied that she had also recently met a couple of interesting people. One truth stands apart. Samia asked what he was like. Iris wondered why he had such a face. Was it really because of Lisa? She had only just thought about it, what he was doing there. He looked so broken. Iris said that, to be honest, she wasn't sure what he was like. He never talks for long. Samia replied in surprise that it was strange that she was interested in the person who was talking to her. She said that okay, about this man, they were suddenly attacked during the investigation. He appeared out of nowhere, and it took him half a second to chop up the monster. His movements were honed. Samia screamed that someone was better than her. She didn't even know about the existence of such a thing. Iris asked if it was okay. It was late. She didn't think so. It's time for her to go to bed. Samia shouted in displeasure that she wanted to talk about this man. Iris replied that no, she should be in bed by now. She needs to rest to grow up as big and strong as she is. She added with a smile that besides, she didn't know him well enough to talk about him. How about they both find out about their mutual friends and then tell each other? Samia replied that it was fine. Samia took a candle and went to sleep. Iris looked after her and thought that God, she was still a baby. The girl lowered her head sadly. Iris excitedly thought that Somia was born prematurely. Her mother was ill and died in time to give birth. The bracelet the girl is running around with is their mom's bracelet. After her death, she raised Somia alone. She fought for life day after day. She decided to protect her sister from all troubles and become the head of the Fransfield family. Even when she was 6, she already knew that this was her calling. She was intensively mastering the art of swordsmanship. She overcame the obstacles in her path to meet the expectations of the family. All she wanted was the ability to wield a sword and apply mania. She's the best in her class right now. The girl continued to argue that she had worked so hard for this position. It cost a lot to be where she is now. She's proud of it. Iris said that's why she wants to know why. She thought that Nozomu was considered the last scoundrel who betrayed the love of his life. Although everything indicates that he is so desperately supporting her, why do people imagine him like this? Iris continued to reason that, like two people who were inseparable, they suddenly became so sharply estranged from each other, and that she was forever pushing him away and the cold attitude of everyone around him. The girl closed her eyes and said that all the circumstances indicated that they had quarreled. Iris really wanted to understand what really happened. She thought it was the experience he had gone through that had given him a constant desire to change. You can see glimpses of his efforts, they are all written on his body. She said she wondered what kind of training he was putting himself through, what kind of attacks he could create. Samiya and Nozomu were met under a tree. The girl complained that she was sent to sleep. Nozomu asked what she was saying, that her sister was also a student at the academy. He's a sophomore himself. Samiya shouted with a smile, that's right, he's also a student. What kind of life is there at the academy? It's probably cool there. Nozomu looked away and showed his black mark. The guy said tensely that she could see that he had a lower rank, so it wasn't so great there. Samiya shouted joyfully that it was true, then they looked like him. She's not like her sister, she's succeeded in everything, and she's just trying so far. Nozomu was surprised to think that there was so much joy in her eyes. The guy continued to argue that at the same time she accepts herself for who she is. Nozomu watched the cat playing with the bracelet and thought it was a strong girl. Nozomu asked that he was interested in her bracelet. It looks expensive, what is it? Samiya replied that it was passed down in her family from generation to generation. It's something that connects their family to each other. The girl went on to say that they wear it to feel connected, even when she is far from each other. It's a reminder that one day they'll get back together. Samiya said it was originally locked in one of the warehouses, but last year her family gave it to her for her birthday. He reminds us that no matter what happens to us, they will always be together with him. Nozomu thought that was why it was so expensive. It's probably good when there are such family trifles. The guy asked with a smile, so when is Samiya's birthday? The girl shouted that it was actually coming soon. Her dad is out of town right now, so he won't be able to join in, but her sister is going to have a party anyway. Nozomu said it sounded cool. Samiya shouted that yes. The guy looked into the girl's eyes with a smile. He asked how about lunch. Samiya replied that she was having lunch with her sister today. The girl came up and said that this is where Samiya is. Samiya cried out in surprise when she saw her sister. Nozomu looked at her in surprise. The girl excitedly said that it was him, they didn't expect to meet like this. Samiya hugged the girl and shouted that the older sister was here. Iris said she was a little surprised. I never would have thought that the new friend her sister was talking about would be Nozomu. The guy looked at Iris in shock. He had not expected to meet her at all, especially to find out that she was Samiya's sister. The girl asked her older sister with interest that she knew Nozomu. The guy excitedly asked that she was her sister. Samiya gasped and said loudly that she had forgotten to tell him that her last name was Fransfield. Nozomu looked at her in surprise. Nozomu thought that he should have realized that her bracelet was not something that an ordinary person could so easily possess. She also mentioned that her sister is the same age as him, and they also have the same black hair. He thought that this was a failure, why he didn't connect at all. He also met with Samiya at that time. Iris gave the girl her lunch. Samiya screamed that thank you. She asked that Nozomu didn't want to join them. The guy excitedly thought that Iris, she has everything, the beautiful face and composure of a goddess. She is incredibly reliable and helps those in need. She is amazing. He thought that the students practically idolized her. I'm sure she gets an incredible number of dinner invitations, but compared to a loser like him, he doesn't understand the reason why she could ask him to have lunch together. Nozomu continued to reason that if they had been in a more public place, the news would have spread throughout the school in a matter of minutes. He looked at Iris. The guy waved his hands and stammered that he was asking for forgiveness, but he probably wouldn't. Samiya leaned towards him and shouted with a smile that they should eat together. The girl pulled the guy by the hand. Nozomu shouted for her to stop. Iris looked at them with a smile and asked Nozomu that he didn't seem to like public places. Nozomu lowered his head and said sheepishly that he was sorry. There were just too many people here, it was a little too much for him, he was very sorry. Iris asked the girl if she didn't mind eating in some quiet place. Samiya said with a smile that then they could eat here. As long as Nozomi is with them, she feels good anywhere. The guy awkwardly said that he wanted to ask Lady Iris. The girl interrupted him and said that there was no need to add formalities when addressing her. In Arkhazam, the status of the homeland does not mean as much as it used to. Nozomi asked that then her friend Thelma join them. The girl replied that Professor Jihad had called her to his office. She told her to go ahead and have lunch without her. The guy thought that the director of the Solminati Academy, Jihad Roundel. He was on the front line in the war against demons that took place 20 years ago. He is considered one of the strongest swordsmen in the world. He thought that the demon invasion was called the Great Invasion, hundreds of thousands of dead. This has led to an influx of refugees. For the first time in history, all countries have united. They all sent large armies, and in the end they managed to resist a huge number of them. Some countries were wiped off the face of the earth, and others suffered from civil unrest. Countries across the continent have suffered astronomical damage. It was decided to create a place where refugees would live and prepare for the next invasion. They built an academy and named it the Solminati Academy. Each country perfected their research in creating martial styles, and Arkhazam was also built as a place of unification. Iris said he didn't have to worry about Thelma. Suddenly, Nozomi noticed something. He saw a sticker in the shape of a dog on the girl's bag. The guy laughed. The girl asked in surprise what had happened. Nozomi awkwardly noted that he just noticed something a little unexpected therefore. Samia shouted with a smile that her sister loves dogs, but she thinks cats are cuter. Iris said she was wrong, dogs are definitely cuter. Especially puppies, there is nothing on earth that can compare to them. Nozomi awkwardly wondered what they were talking about. Samia replied that she understood what she was talking about, but she still thought cats were better. Iris shouted that she was sure she had seen them wagging their tails and following you everywhere. It's so charming. Samia showed the cat and screamed how she could say that dogs are cuter than cats. She has to look at this cutie when she strokes him. He purrs and makes the cutest sounds she's ever heard. They were engaged in a conversation about who was better. The girls were smiling and arguing with each other. Nozomi has been watching them all this time. He laughed awkwardly. Iris came to her senses and said she was sorry, they were a little carried away. They will continue this discussion tomorrow. Somia said this is their 357th cat versus dog meeting. She thinks that this time they will find out who the winner is. The girl stroked the cat and looked at her sister and Nozomi. She said with a smile that so. Samia asked with interest that she could ask how they met. Nozomi replied that they met by chance. Iris said that he was able to chop up a demonic bear in less than a second. Samia asked admiringly what it was about him. Iris confidently said that Thelma was almost attacked, but thanks to him she was saved. Samia looked at the guy enthusiastically. Nozomi shouted in alarm that this was not true. He said that in fact he goes to the lowest rank school because of his suppressed abilities. Iris said it was weird, he attacks like that but he's still in the worst class. The guy said that this attack was too strong to use in the academy, but he was able to achieve this only because he trained his body to the limit. His magic is too little. He can only attack once. Iris replied that he said that when he used any kind of enchantment, he was only able to attack with 1 or 2 Kai blades. She asked why he wouldn't join the group. Nozomi said tensely that no one wanted to team up with him. Iris asked if it was because of his suppressed abilities. The guy replied that he was. The sisters looked at him in surprise. Iris said she didn't know if it was the right thing to say, but he didn't need to be strong to be in the group. He is familiar with the Spasm Forest. This knowledge will raise his priority in the list. The girl said that after he left them, he went into the forest alone, didn't she? Iris began to recall the events of that day in order to tell everything correctly. Iris said it definitely means he spent the night in the woods. The Forest of Spasm is an incredibly dangerous place filled with demons. The forest is not a place for someone inexperienced. The guy thought he was staying at Shino's. The guy went on to argue that this is one of the safest places to stay in the forest. After all, this is the place where a dragon-class adventurer lives. However, Nozomu spent countless nights alone in the forest. It was all because of Shino, who sometimes drove him out into the woods at night. She screamed at him to get out of here right now. Iris excitedly asked why he hadn't joined the group then. This is because of his breakup with Lisa or because of the hostile attitude of other students towards him. The girl asked if there might be another reason. Nozomi recalled all the traumatic moments. Lisa left him and others began to mock him. Iris told him to understand her correctly, but she doesn't know the truth about that fight. He's not the kind of person who makes sentences about something if she's not sure, so she asks. Nozomi got up from the ground saying that if she forgave him, he told Samia that he was asking for forgiveness. He said loudly that he would leave first, he had to go. The girls looked after him. Samia called her sister. Iris said she didn't know about it, didn't she? How should I put it? The students of the academy dislike Nozomu. It seems that due to his lack of success, he is treated like a useless nobody at school. She doesn't think that's all. She just wanted to personally ask him about the rumors. She has always been surrounded only by people who respect the path she is following. The idea that Nozomu has become an outcast and is being pushed around is impossible for her to understand. This is what can be seen in those whose hearts have been broken and torn apart. Iris said that all she wanted to do was get to know him better. Samia said he saved her friend with an attack she had never seen before. Iris said that all she wanted to say was that she didn't want to just believe such rumors. This is the first time her words have been rejected by someone, and it was more than she could have expected. She really hadn't thought properly about his situation and was clearly not prepared for such an outcome. The girl continued to reason that she must have said too much. She feels like she did something wrong. It would be better to apologize to Nozomu. The guy stopped and thought that it had already become a habit for him to escape from reality. Part of him wants to go back and find out what she wanted to say, but he needs to distract his thoughts with training to avoid the pain. Some girl said that Lisa wasn't the only one who dumped Nozomu when the rumors started. Most of his friends didn't hesitate to leave him. They were all the same. The guy raised his head and saw Lisa's face, which glared at her furiously. Ken and her friend looked at her in surprise and then turned their heads. Lisa's friend glared at him. Ken sighed and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Nozomu remembered walking down the street and seeing Ken with Lisa. The guy stuttered and replied that yes, it had been a long time since we had seen each other. The girl shouted that he hadn't spoken to her, that they were close and why he was at this school. Nozomu thought it was Camille Vue-Noose, Lisa's first friend. Nozomu continued to reason that in the first year, she was also his friend, but rejected him faster and harshest of all when rumors began to spread. Lisa asked what he wanted. Nozomu thought that he had tried countless times to prove his innocence, but every attempt had been in vain. Everyone around him rejected his requests, and his heart gradually began to grow cold. The guy went on to argue that all he wanted to do was clear up this misunderstanding. However, they did not allow him to speak and justify himself, so he gave up. He began to hide the pain inside himself. Nozomu thought he was starting to give up on the idea that he could do things right at all and focused on working to restore his own state of mind. But he only made things worse. He asked how things were going. He meant. Nozomu thought that his mind was shaken by the pain that upset the balance of his emotions. They were constantly swinging back and forth like a hurricane. He wants to talk to her again. Lisha told him not to come any closer. She can't even look at him. He should just disappear. He should just get out and not come back. Nozomu pressed his lips into a thin line and looked at her. Lisa got up from the grass and said that if he didn't leave, then she would just go to another place. The guy looked after her. Suddenly, Camilla hit him in the chest, shouting that he was a fool. He doesn't see how upset Lisa is right now. He's a loser who needs to be looked for. Ken looked at him and then turned around and followed the girls. Nozomu fell to the ground and just sat in silence for a few seconds. He clenched his teeth tightly. The guy was running fast through the woods. He wanted to get as far away from that place as possible. Sheena walked through the forest thinking that she couldn't find food. The guy thought that he often had thoughts of leaving this world. Then he met Iris and then Lisa. All these feelings penetrated into his heart. Nozomu stopped and tried to catch his breath. He was running at the limits of his abilities, so he was tired. He reached into his pocket and took out a compass. The guy excitedly said that it was not good to take him deeper. The guy continued to reason that there are many demonic beasts in the forest. This is the first time there is a problem with his compass. He did not expect this to happen, most likely because of the weather. It's fashionable to call this place safe, but it's better to wait here. He must build a shelter and wait for the fog to leave. He'll wait in the trees and come to his senses. The guy looked at the tall tree and thought about it. He wanted to figure out how to make a shelter. Suddenly, he noticed something strange ahead. Nozomu screamed that something was going on there. A strong wind has risen. Nozomu covered his face with his hand and said loudly what was going on here. No matter which way you look at it, it doesn't look like it's somewhere in the Alakazam. Nozomu looked up and saw a giant dragon. The guy looked at his wings and scales in shock. He thought it was a creature with an overwhelming aura and absolute power. Nozomu excitedly said that this was a legendary representative. A creature that should have remained only in the stories of legends, a real dragon. The monster folded its wings and began to fall down. He stretched out his clawed paw to crush the guy. Nozomu began to run away quickly. The dragon landed on the ground. Nozomu jumped to dodge the rocks that flew after the dragon landed. He quickly jumped up from the ground and thought hard that he needed to run. The guy threw a couple of magic balls at the monster. Nozomu went on to speculate that the weapon he usually uses to escape from monsters in the forest. The dragon looked at the dust that had risen after his landing. Nozomu quickly ran forward with the thought that lies in the light he uses to get here. The dragon roared loudly, and because of his roar, a strong wind rose, which threw the guy aside. The monster turned out to be so strong that even his roar was able to resist him. Nozomu managed to grab onto a rock to keep from falling. The guy thought that the dragon was capable of hitting a man with a simple roar. The dragon released a fireball. Nozomu thought that at the same moment all sounds disappeared. The dragon fell into the ground and left a huge hole. Nozomu was thrown into the air, and he thought that the mountain on which the dragon landed had turned into a huge crater, the size of an academy. Nozomu fell to the ground with great speed. The dragon spread its wings again. Nozomu quickly drank the elixir and thought it was spiritual mania, the magic of spirits. The guy went on to argue that this was different from magic that didn't use spirits. It doesn't need to be processed anywhere else. Therefore, it can be activated as soon as the spirit decides to use this magic. Nozomu ran to the side to dodge the dragon's blows. The guy thought that compared to other types of magic, spiritual magic is dramatically faster. He began to deflect blows one by one with his sword. He couldn't cope, so he suffered serious damage. Nozomu fell to the ground. The dragon began to slowly approach him. The guy began to move slowly. The dragon got to him earlier. The monster hit him with a clawed paw. The guy flew off and hit a rock. Nozomu was in a lot of pain, but he couldn't resist the monster. He fell to the ground and looked at the joyful dragon. The guy remembered his childhood. He saw his parents and Lisa. Nozomu thought he wanted to support Lisa's dream. That's what he thought, even though he continued to think so. Nozomu continued to reason that the master, although she is quite rude, but she is undoubtedly a good person. Henry and Norn took care, and he also met Iris and Somia. The guy thought that although she tried to convince him that she would not judge a person based on rumors. As always, he can't do anything in serious situations. The dragon struck the place where the guy was lying. Suddenly, Shino appeared and saved him. She managed to grab him right in front of the monster's paws and avoid being hit with him. Shino angrily asked Nozomu what he was doing here. The guy said that the master is here. The girl said that she had lost sight of him in this fog, so she went in search of him. It seems that he is in an extremely difficult situation. She always defeated magical creatures that were strong, but she thought that there were 5 wings of different colors, a black body like a ghoul. Unmistakably, this is the legendary Dragon King. What a misfortune. I never thought that at such an age I would meet a monster with legendary status. Nozomu said he was the Dragon King. Shino said his name was Tiamat. About 5,000 years ago, he started eating his own kind, eventually becoming sealed by them. She thought that the Dragon King was Tiamat. He even ate his own kind. He was feared as a heresy among heresies. This is a legendary dragon that disappeared from the face of the earth 5,000 years ago when it was sealed. Shino said that he was really unlucky to encounter such a divine being. Nozomu said that the master. The guy overcame himself and took the sword in his hands. The girl thought that his internal organs were damaged. She told him to listen to him carefully. He has to escape when she distracts this monster. Nozomu asked what about her. She pushed the guy aside and screamed that if she stayed alone, they would not be able to escape. He should just run away and not turn around. Shino asked what he understood. Nozomu shouted loudly for the master not to do this. He watched as the girl quickly ran towards the dragon. Shino swung her sword and shouted that it was a phantom blade. She hit the dragon's legs, but nothing happened. Shino screamed furiously that she knew it wouldn't hurt him in any way. The monster spread its wings. The dragon created magical streams that flew at Shino. With one blow, she managed to cut 5 rays of light. With this Kai, she destroyed an additional 10 rays of light. The dragon roared loudly and released new magical rays. After the eclipse, Shino blasted the attack of 20 rays of light, but the waves of rays continued to advance. There was no end to the dragon's attacks. She didn't have any free hands left, so she started using the scabbard of her sword. Over time, the power of the rays of light began to grow. She was able to cut through the rays of light, which were no more than 5, 4, 3, 2. The number of rays of light that she could stop with one blow began to decrease. Her Kai began to fail, which caused her efficiency to plummet. She thought she could barely contain him. Shino thought that she would never have been able to handle this in the past. Even if she were in better condition, she can't imagine it. My arm muscles were already starting to hurt. She began to lose control of her body. She said she was just a useless girl who was even worse than her lousy student. Extreme exhaustion and the loss of 5 senses began to attack her. Her sense of taste was gone. Her hands and skin are numb, as if they are under anesthesia. Shino thought that even her eyesight had started to deteriorate. She must be dying. At least this way she can escape from her student, which is actually not bad either. The girl smiled and thought that she seemed to enjoy spending time with her stupid student, a little more than she expected. If he managed to save him, then it's not that bad. Nozomu shouted that he was a master. She rolled her eyes in shock and looked back. Shino saw Nozomu and shouted loudly that he was a fool. He should run away from here as soon as possible. The dragon spread its wings and released light rays. The skill of Kai, the destroyer of light. The Kai that he sent into the ground came out from under the enemy. This caused the enemy to rise into the air to be destroyed by the power of Kai. Among all the Kai abilities that Shino possesses, it is the strongest with the longest attack range. This is a special type of Kai skill. However, due to the sudden exhaustion of Kai, her strength was lost. Shino screamed loudly for him to stop. She watched in fright as the rays of light flew at Nozomu. Suddenly, they all crashed into the guy, as well as into the ground next to him. Nozomu was thrown up a few meters. He fell to the ground with a loud scream. The guy coughed and clutched his chest. Suddenly, his body temperature began to drop. His body felt the approach of death. It was much more painful than all the previous times when he was attacked. Due to blood loss, brain activity began to be disrupted. He didn't even have the strength to remember. Nozomu wondered if he was going to die now. He realized the cruel reality. Nozomu thought not. The guy gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. He could barely move his fingers, but he can't just let go. The rejection of death prompted his strength. The cold began to recede from his heart. He doesn't want to die. He's not going to give up. If someone refuses excuses and desires to escape from the cruel reality, the only thing at this moment is a desperate desire to live. Burn the remnants of life and turn on the light so that it does not go out. A strong desire to live. Nozomu screamed loudly and got up from the ground. The guy opened his eyes wide and looked at the dragon. It flared up in him. Yozomo's concentration skyrocketed and improved his sense of time. The guy ran at the monster with his sword. He thought it was too slow. Nozomu wondered why he was always so slow. That's always the case. This slowness, it's like his body is bound with metal chains. This prevents him from moving forward. These invisible chains emit barely noticeable light. Nozomu grabbed the chains and shouted loudly so that they would not interfere with him. The guy managed to break them and get free. The guy looked at his hands and thought that there was no way he could have broken them. The appearance of these shining metal chains out of nowhere. It must be a product of his imagination. He continued to reason that for him, he was aware of the existence of chains, and he was confident that he would be able to free himself from them. The guy screamed loudly and headed forward. Nozomu quickly ran towards the dragon. He was so fast that it was impossible to see who was running. The dragon looked at him in surprise because of the incredible acceleration. The guy glared at the monster. He ran with the thought that the dragon had only lost sight of Nozomu for a split second. Nozomu quickly drew his sword. The guy shouted furiously that he was summoning the phantom blade. He thought that now Kai compressed thinner and sharper than a single hair. He pointed his sword at the dragon. Nozomu went on to speculate that it was fired at the same speed as the sword swing was made. However, this attack failed to damage even the cornea of the eye. The dragon roared loudly. Despite the fact that the dragon is a spiritual being, it still possesses a physical body, which means that it also has an animal side. If you attack one of the senses, he will try to protect it. It's a defense mechanism. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the mountains began to collapse right before our eyes. Tiamat hit the ground with such force that it caused a strong earthquake, however, at the same moment. The dragon roared loudly. The ground collapsed beneath him. It seems that having stepped on, the dragon got into a cave that existed from below. The monster began to swing its tail from side to side. Up to this point, Nozomu could not move freely due to the intense vibrations of the soil, but he managed to protect himself from the impact of the landing. Nozomu ran through the rock. He looked at the dragon confidently and waved his sword. Tiamat was a spirit king capable of using exceptional magic comparable to spiritual magic. The dragon roared loudly when he noticed the guy. Before Nozomu could take 3 steps and launch an attack, Tiamat began using the skill in the hope of getting rid of him. Shino screamed loudly that she wouldn't let him. The girl swung her fist and hit the ground. Nozomu, who had managed to free himself from the shackles of his suppressive ability, rushed at high speed. Shino's light destroyer helped Nozomu's breakthrough by reflecting some of the effects around Nozomu while deflecting the rays of light. This paved the way between Nozomu and Tiamat, but he screamed furiously and ran at the dragon. He was moving at a speed that Shino had never reached. The guy was getting closer and closer by the second. The dragon raised its head and began to create a magic ball. Even the dragon's breath is considered spiritual magic. Therefore, it can be activated without the need to create a magic circle or cast spells. Nozomu stared at the monster. The guy thought that the dragon had become irritated by the insignificant resistance of people. He lost his mind and went crazy. He wanted to destroy the world he was trapped in. Tiamat began to accumulate all his power in the wings of the 5 colors. The dragon created a huge magic ball. Shino asked in shock what it was. The dragon raised its head with a magic ball. Suddenly, several magical symbols appeared above his head. They began to cover the whole sky. The dragon let out a loud scream. The monster let out an even stronger roar. This world was created to seal Timoth. The dragon felt great pain. He was blinded by the bright light and couldn't move. Each time, the dragon lost its way. Shino excitedly screamed that it couldn't be. The world was trying to resist his power. Nozomu thought that not now, in the midst of a heated battle, he had every chance. Nozomu pulled out his sword with a loud squeal. Tiamat, weakened as a result of the seal's action, became like an S-rank adventurer. The guy charged with a shout. Shino looked at him angrily and shouted that the stupid student was leaving. Nozomu screamed that he was summoning the phantom blade. He hit the obstacle in front of him with all his might. Nozomu cut a whole piece of dragon skin in front of him. He cut the scales under Tiamat's throat. The kai collected and embedded in the blade exploded inside his throat, which is simply amazing. He swung his sword in such a way as if a path had been laid in front of him. Nozomu screamed loudly. He hit the damaged skin. He was finally able to injure the dragon. Using the momentum provided by the first blow, he swung next to him once more. The dragon screamed loudly when he felt the pain of the first blow. Nozomu has already swung for the second one. The guy stuck his sword into the dragon's skin. He pulled it to get it out of the monster's body, but nothing worked. The dragon raised its head and roared loudly. The dragon raised its head and with it Nozomu. Even with all the injuries he had received, the great dragon had not yet been defeated. With an earth-shaking cry, he was helplessly trying to shake the guy off. The dragon was rapidly shaking from head to side. The guy was holding onto the sword with his hands and feet. With all his remaining strength, he grabbed his sword, which was tightly stuck in the dragon's body, concentrating kai in his right hand. Nozomu screamed that this was the end. The guy shouted that he was summoning the skill of Kai, the destroyer of light. Then a Kai comparable to a high-level magic skill shot at the sword. He hit the dragon with his power and the monster roared loudly. The dragon's body glowed brightly. His body began to collapse. Nozomu's attack eventually blew off the dragon's head along with the lump of nerves inside. The dragon began to fall to the ground. The dragon fell to the ground, and Nozomu could not stay on the dragon's body, and because of this he rolled on the ground. The dragon looked at the sky one last time and then began to disappear. Nozomu exhaled wearily and looked up at the sky. He was so exhausted after the battle. The guy began to watch as the dragon turned into dust. Suddenly, a cloud of dust headed towards the guy. Shino screamed for the stupid student to wake up. The guy felt a magical cloud envelop her. Nozomu closed his eyes and accepted his fate. The guy really wanted to rest and get some sleep now. The guy was in a strange place. There was water everywhere and nothing else. Nozomu was bound by huge chains that hampered his movements. He was completely alone. Nozomu picked up one of the chains and looked at them carefully. The guy lowered his head to see something other than water. The guy noticed the dragon's eyes in the water. Nozomu noticed that the dragon was looking at him unharmed. The guy was right above the monster he had recently defeated. He didn't understand what was going on. The dragon was bound, just like Nozomu, but one chain connected them together. The guy looked excitedly at the monster, whose entire body was in chains. Nozomu was not too different from him. Nozomu opened his eyes and thought it was all a dream. Shino carefully looked at his face and excitedly shouted that he had finally woken up, how good it was. They stared at each other for a few seconds. Nozomu jumped up and shouted loudly that there was a monster here. Shino punched him in the face and said that she had been nursing his wounds for 3 days and that was his thanks. Nozomu remembered how he saw a dragon bound with chains. If you think about it, it only seems like 10 minutes have passed. In fact, 3 days have passed since the fight with Tiamat. He ended up at Shino's house. There is no furniture here, except for the most necessary things for everyday life. The room in which he is rebuilding is his teacher's hut. Nozomu touched his hands to make sure that he was really all right now. He thought it smelled like a pretty effective medicine that was calling him. Nozomu bowed and said he was sorry. Thank you for healing his wounds. Shino turned away and replied with a smile that it was better that way. After all the unnecessary worry he'd put her through. The guy smiled in response to her words. Nozomu remained silent and thought about something. Suddenly, he looked sharply at Shino and asked that she was not injured, everything was fine. Shino waved and replied that she was fine. It seems that she took too much chi, but don't worry about it. As for him, she had been watching him closely for the past 3 days. Shino looked into the guy's eyes and added that about his current condition, she had to tell him something else. He should listen to her carefully. She looked at him intently so that he would understand the seriousness. Nozomu said he was listening. The guy couldn't even imagine what exactly they would be talking about. Shino said that, first of all, about what happened. He whitewashed Tiamat in a clogged world. She was shocked that he had actually succeeded. The guy asked what the clogged world was. She replied that this was a world created by dragons in order to seal the Dragon King of Destruction, although Tiamat himself was considered nothing more than a legend. Nozomu spoke, and how did they finish in? Shino interrupted him and said that the dragon might know the answer to this, but they are people, not spirits. This is not something they can easily understand. She said that he defeated Tiamat and appropriated his powers. He is now the so-called Dragon Slayer. A dragon slayer, the likes of which have not appeared in the last few years. Heirs of great power, the embodiment of great power. There were also those who used spells that existing magic cannot explain, or those who were able to awaken superhuman abilities. They are creatures that appear only in fairy tales. This is clearly recorded in history. It is that their last appearance was 300 years ago, a long time ago, when the Cremazone Empire was founded. It is said that they no longer exist. Nozomu remembered that bright light again. The guy said he was a dragon slayer. He couldn't believe what he had just said. It's just unbelievable. Shino said they should check something. She handed him the weapon, saying that here was her sword. This sword originally belonged to his teacher. She took out her other sword. The girl quickly raised the sword above her head to attack. Nozomu shouted in surprise for her to wait. The guy thought he couldn't hold on. He held his sword out in front of him and deflected Shino's blow. The girl sheathed her sword and said that was what she thought. Nozomu asked in surprise what it was. Shino said that after becoming a dragon slayer, his physical abilities grew. She knew that he had a talent for using curved blades. Dragon slayers inherit their power and make them more powerful. Nozomu looked at his rewound hands and clenched and unclenched them several times. Shino said it was quite possible that this had happened to him, although it doesn't seem to have gotten much stronger. Shino said that's how great the effect of suppressing abilities is for him. His increased abilities are completely suppressed. Shino lowered his head sadly. The teacher went on to say that, come to think of it, when he fought Tiamat, he was able to free himself from the suppression of abilities. He can still do it. Nozomu thought he might be free from these chains that bind him. The guy remembered how for the first time in his life he managed to break the chains. Nozomu felt the chains on him again. He took them with one hand as he had a sword in the other. Suddenly, he realized what had just happened and shouted excitedly. Shino said it looked like it. She had never heard of anyone being able to release their abilities from suppression. She asked what he would do now. Nozomu asked what he would do now. The girl said loudly that the power he had acquired was incredibly strong. Usually such power attracts different things. For example, status, fame, authority, envy, and even cannibals. She added that if it starts once, it will never end. Shino looked at him and said, so she will ask one more time what he wants to do from now on. Nozomu gripped his sword and looked worriedly in front of him. He didn't know what to say. Shino said loudly that she had been thinking about it for a while. He doesn't necessarily get stronger than he is now. The guy excitedly said what it was. Shino said that even if it's about supporting his beloved, even if he wants to support her, this girl doesn't feel what he feels. He doesn't use the techniques they are taught at the academy. Shino said that the techniques she teaches will be much more effective. If he had used a ghost blade on a wooden mannequin, the wave of force would have spread over a huge distance. And if a person were in place, it's even scary to imagine. Shino stared into his eyes and confidently said that the only thing he should beware of is the fear of facing reality, as well as the desire to give up. He tried to avoid the truth because he was rejected by the person closest to him. He was alone, and no one could influence his desire to become stronger. Everything led to the fact that he withdrew into himself and ran away. He stayed at the academy for the sake of Lisp, did nothing but practice with a sword. At the same time, without making any attempts to meet face to face with the person who is at the center of his problems. He doesn't see the real thing. He's still trapped in his past. Shino said, well, even if she told him to decide what to do in the future, she was sure he wouldn't be able to decide alone. She went on to say that for now he should focus on recovery. In the end, he will have to make a choice. Besides, she's not sure if he'll be able to return to the city with such injuries. He should stay to rest in the hut. Shino moved away from the bed where Nozomu was sitting and inserted the swords into a special stand. The girl said exactly one more thing. The guy thought discontentedly, what else? Suddenly she pulled the guy and hugged him tightly. She shouted loudly that she was welcome back. Nozomu looked at her in shock. He did not expect such behavior from the teacher. Shino smiled and patted the guy on the back, but very gently so as not to disturb his wound. She said that he had done a good job. Nozomu blushed at her words and almost cried. The guy pulled back a little and looked at Shino's face. Nozomu thought she had dark circles under her eyes and was breathing so hard. The girl smiled at him. They looked at each other and began to cry. They hugged tightly again. Nozomu thought it was because she had been taking care of him for so long. He said he was back. Nozomu fell asleep in the arms of the teacher. Shino wiped away his tear and said that she never would have thought that this child would become a dragon slayer, and now he can sleep. She is sure that his body and mind need rest. Shino hugged him closer to her and thought about how much tension his mind was under. It's hard to even imagine how exhausted he was. She's a Shino. She was born not on the continent, but in an island country in the Far East, the second daughter of the head of the family who owns a particularly famous fencing-style mikagura, able to teach fencing in the best possible environment. Although there were those who ridiculed her for wielding a sword despite the fact that she is a woman, Shino's father taught her everything the way she wanted. Her mother also approved of her ambitions. Her older sister was especially loving towards her. All her battles ended in victory, and her glorious military service received high marks from everyone. She even personally received a commendation and an award from the most respected person in the village. It was when Shino's sister introduced her to the young man who was to become her disciple. Soon after their meeting, Shino was able to experience love. After learning about each other's feelings, they got engaged. With the status of a noble family, unsurpassed strength and honor, a blessing for a marriage proposal that could be called true love, she was at the peak of her happiness. However, when she was supposed to get engaged to the groom, an unfounded accusation of adultery turned the wedding ceremony into chaos. The marriage was annulled. Shino proved to everyone that the accusations were lies. No one listened to her. It was only a year later that Shino found out the true identity of the criminal who framed her. It was her sister who loved her the most. When she heard the news that they were getting married, she decided that she would never allow it, that she would take everything from her. Her status, her honor. She's going to lose everything she had. So she won't be happy in this life anymore. There is no place for her in this family anymore. No one will save her, no one will protect her. The girl tore out a piece of her sister's hair. She brushed her hair off her hands. Her sister told her not to worry. She is sure that she will have a wonderful marriage with him. 3 days later, Shino left the family without saying a word to anyone. She left her home, her country, everything that was left behind on this island, and eventually made her way to the Spasimski forest, a strange land, untouched by the hand of man. She moved to a place where she lived without communicating with anyone. Shino looked at Nozomu and said that they were strikingly similar, like the one who was abandoned in the same way. At first, she hated how much he reminded her of her former self. She continued to reason that now. She closed her eyes and cried out in pain. Shino clenched her hands into fists and breathed heavily. She's feeling a lot of pain. The girl looked at her palm and thought that her chi could not recover in any way. Instead, it shrinks and disappears. She was holding the guy carefully with one hand. She continued to argue that the dream is about death, illness. Those who suffer from this disease slowly lose their chi until they die. It is said that the reason is exceeding the limit and depletion of chi, causing serious damage to the heart. Shino remembered the fight with the dragon, in which she had exhausted all her strength. She said that in this world, everything is really not going the way they would like. If there are several cases when people are recovering, but there is no medicine yet. She said there was still a lot she wanted to tell Nozomu about. She had only taught him sword techniques during the time they were together. He doesn't have time for anything at all. Shino went on to say that he had listened to one last thing. That's what she wants to tell him. As long as she's here, she'll do her best to finish what she started. A week later, Shino and Nozomu were standing in front of the gate. The guy said they had arrived, thanks for seeing him off. Shino replied with a smile that she was still his master. Naturally, she needs to help her student. The guy thought that even during his training with the master, the medicines from her bag with which she healed him, it did not help immediately like the drugs from the shops, but instead increased the regeneration of the body. Before, she behaved differently. Usually when she was upset, she used martial arts along with a stream of insults under the pretext of parenting. But recently she somehow strangely stumbled during a conversation. It was as if she was trying to show a caring side. Shino looked at the tall gate that leads to the city. The girl excitedly said that after seeing him in person, the city was really huge, so amazing. Nozomu asked that she had never been to Arkezama before. She replied that she had never. She didn't really want to. She thinks she's sorry she didn't do it sooner. The guy looked at his teacher and said he would be late, but she wanted him to show her the city. Shino asked with a smile that he wasn't a student himself. She asked with displeasure that he had been absent for a week without permission. Won't he have problems because of this? Nozomu awkwardly replied that yes, maybe. Shino grabbed his hand and led him into the city, saying that then they should go quickly. Nozomu replied that it was fine. The girl began to examine everything carefully. Shino excitedly looked at the food stalls and asked what kind of red powder it was, and the seeds looked straight like cat claws. Nozomu thought with a smile that he had behaved the same way for the first time. They came to the park. Nozomu began to tell the girl about the city. Nozomu stopped in front of the academy building and said that this was it. He studies here. Shino looked at the academy with a smile and said that then she would go back to the forest. Nozomu bowed and said that he was very grateful to the master. The guy heard a loud ringing. Nozomu shouted that this was a failure, this morning's call. He excitedly thought that he had completely forgotten that the final exam was coming soon. Shino said that he has been missing for almost a week without a valid reason, so she doubts that she needs to worry about being late right now. Nozomu thought that he preferred not to lose even more points. The girl added with a smile that there was one more thing, after his classes today he should go to her hut. She still has a lot to talk to him about. Nozomu turned around on the run and asked in surprise what she was saying, that she still had something to say to him. The girl replied that they would talk when the time was right, but now he was late. The guy ran away screaming that she hadn't stopped him. Shino went home and said with a smile that it was a pity that her student would no longer be able to accompany her, but she thought she could walk a little more. Final exams of the Solminati Academy. The results of 2 exams, practical and written, are a decisive factor in determining the student's rank next year. The class teacher did not ask the reason for his absence, so his explanations were vague. The other students didn't want to attract the teacher's attention, so they just acted like there was nothing to it. Nozomu exhaled and continued to reason that no one else had brought up the subject afterwards. That was the end of the morning class, but nothing terrible happened. Henry and Nozomu met in front of the staff room. The girl asked with displeasure what he was hiding. He missed an entire week for no good reason, it's just not okay. The guy awkwardly replied that it wasn't that important. He was just injured because he went into the forest and was attacked by a monster. Henry shouted in displeasure that it was extremely important. Henry asked what kind of creature it was. She needs to know what kind of creature attacked you and where. Nozomu awkwardly said that he thought it was a bear. He really doesn't remember where, but about at the eastern end of the forest. The girl asked him what he was talking about, one of the 3 brothers of the rabid bears. He replied that he did. Henry looked at him angrily. She was not happy with his answer. The guy was very uncomfortable with her gaze. Henry excitedly asked how his injury was. Nozomu grabbed his hand and replied that he had been bedridden for a while, but that everything was fine now. The girl said that then she would ask him one more thing. Why didn't he try to inform them of his absence? He lives in a dormitory, so he could at least contact the academy. Nozomu looked away and replied that his condition was worse than he expected. He couldn't walk much, and also his classmates didn't care about him. He thought he was getting sad because he was saying it. He went on to argue that he hated lying, but he couldn't tell her the whole truth. Suddenly, the girl began to whimper loudly. Nozomu looked at her in surprise. Henry started crying and shouted loudly that he didn't trust her. She's really so unreliable in his opinion. Nozomu did not expect such behavior from a girl at all. He asked what it was. She misunderstood why she was acting like this. Henry screamed that he had told her a lie. 3 rabid bears were killed by Iris's team about 10 days ago. She can't see it, but she can tell he's moving like he's hurt. Nozomu excitedly wondered if his movements were so obvious, and she also knew the difference in medications. Henry leaned towards him and spoke to Nozomu to tell her. Nozomu blushed and thought that she was so beautiful that he could tell her everything. This woman is one of those who can seduce men without even making an effort. She doesn't know about it herself. She asked that he wouldn't tell her anything. The guy blushed even more as the girl got closer and closer. Nozomu excitedly thought that this was real evil. He mumbled something unintelligible. Iris was sitting outside with her sister and Thelma. Samia excitedly asked that she hadn't resolved the misunderstanding with Nozomu. Thelma asked in surprise what the misunderstanding was. Iris replied with a smile that she and Nozomu had talked about something a few days ago. Something had happened. Thelma looked at her questioningly, and Iris looked joyfully into her eyes. Iris remembered their last meeting with Nozomu. Thelma excitedly said that, if you think about it, she noticed that she hadn't been seen on lunch breaks or after school lately. Was there a reason for that? Iris smiled and said yes. She didn't think it would be good to suddenly break into his classroom, so she waited at the main entrance, but she couldn't see him. He hasn't been to school for a while. Thelma looked at Iris excitedly and thought that the girl should be so worried about the guy. She had never seen her like this before. It was amazing. Suddenly, Nozomu heard the sound of a bell. The guy cried out excitedly. He pulled away from the girl and quickly ran away. Henry looked after the guy in surprise. Iris packed all her things in a bag. Suddenly, she turned her head towards her sister and noticed that she was very sad. The girl tensely called her older sister. Samia excitedly asked that she could invite Nozomu to her next birthday party. Iris looked at her in surprise. She had not expected such a request. Iris asked that she wants it, but it's a buried party. Samia replied that Nozomu was his friend. He helped her return the bracelet she had given her. She always wanted to repay him in some way. Samia blushed and awkwardly said that she did not know what had happened to him. Nozomu looks a little lonely when he smiles, but she does. The girl fell silent. Samia added that she wants her friends to be happy, even if it's a little bit. Iris smiled at her sister's words. She is very proud of her now. Iris said she was right, she would like her friends to smile. This is absolutely correct. The girl thought that she didn't know about Nozomu's past. She could only imagine how much he was cornered. At first, it only satisfied her interest. However, when she saw how much effort he was putting in, she began to sympathize with him. That's why she was so upset that she still hadn't been able to resolve that misunderstanding. Iris smilingly told his sister that she would take care of the conversation and clarify all the details with him, and then invite him to her birthday party. Samia shouted joyfully that it was fine, thanks to her. Thelma watched them with a smile. Nozomu came to class and began to stretch. He could feel the burning gaze of the teacher's assistant, Henry. He often attends such classes and helps out when necessary. The guy continued to reason that, however, a rank 10 class can have no more than one assistant instructor assigned to them, while rank 1 has several of them. During the afternoon practice sessions, demonstrations took place, such as a demonstration of ritual magic, and at the end there were training battles. Mars shouted that Nozomu was out of luck. Mars smiled smugly and said that he meant to be his opponent again. Nozomu gripped his sword tightly and looked at the guy intently. Mars said that regardless of the opponent, he still won't be able to win, then he believes it's not worth worrying about. The guy laughed loudly at Nozomu. Nozomu waved his sword and thought that he was still uncomfortable, but at least his body was moving as he needed to. His wounds are fine. The sensations from the training sword and from his personal one are almost the same. The guy looked down at the floor and thought that he could get free. Nozomu grabbed his chains again, which prevent him from releasing his real power. Nozomu continued to reason that he wouldn't do it right now, he shouldn't release it. This anxiety is from his dreams. It seems to him that something will break inside him. He turned his head to the side and thought what else was the Kai technique that he had learned from the master. Shino asked him that he didn't use the techniques she taught him at the academy. Nozomu closed his eyes and thought hard, wondering if he could apply them. Henry shouted loudly, "Well, they can read." The guy jerked in surprise. From the ground and quickly ran towards Nozomu. He used his talent and released his energy. The guy glared at his opponent. Nozomu exhaled and looked fiercely into Mars' eyes. The guy also released his energy and stood in a pose to repel the attack of Mars, who really wanted to defeat him. Mars waved his huge sword and shouted loudly that he was just a good Mars pushed off as a boy and died from his sword. Nozomu thought it was a downward blow from behind the head. Mars removed the sword from the right point and took it aside. Nozomu looked at him in surprise and thought it was a hoax. The guy took a step to the side. Nozomu punched the guy in the stomach with all his might. Mars sighed in surprise. He didn't expect the guy to be able to hit him at all. Nozomu hid his eyes behind his bangs. Mars waved his sword and tried to stab Nozomu. The guy quickly ran at him and deflected the blow. Mars excitedly thought that he had blocked his best shot. Now it's time to launch an attack. He punched the guy in the stomach with all his might. Mars cried out in displeasure. Nozomu flew up to him again and hit him in the chest with his hand. Nozomu grabbed Mars by the head and hit him on his knee. The guy screamed in pain. He did not expect such actions from Nozomu, who just yesterday could not even carry out one attack against him. Mars managed to get away from Nozomu. The guy shouted furiously so that he, the loser, would not get arrogant. Nozomu quickly ran at the guy who hadn't recovered yet. Nozomu wondered how many Kai he had. Mars waved his sword and released a large amount of energy. He shouted that he would destroy Nozomu, he was just a fool. Mars screamed that he would tear him to pieces like some kind of garbage. He used the air coating of the sword. The Kai technique, in which the sword is wrapped in a wind blade capable of tearing apart objects. A technique with a high density of air compression, which subsequently forms a strong pressure that hits a weaker opponent, blocking the possibility of a counterattack. In addition, the wind cover increases the speed of cutting attacks, which become much stronger. Mars quickly ran to Nozomu. He tried to hit him, but the guy dodged. Nozomu thought it was a diagonal strike. Nozomu took a step back to avoid the blow. He thought that at such a distance from the blade of the wind, it was possible to dodge. He repeats his attacks even more often than before, so he will be able to read his movements for 3 moves. Mars furiously wondered what was going on, why he couldn't hit it with a sword. Nozomu dodged again and thought that with Mars' ability known as Wind Spirit Protection. He went on to argue that just for the air element, the power and accuracy of spells and Kai techniques increased significantly. Mars thought that if he was the same as before, he should have seen his clumsy blocks, dodges, and solutions. Nozomu dodged and thought that under the effect of the suppression ability, He couldn't have done anything with a downward punch even if he had strengthened himself with Kai. The guy continued to reason that in his current state, he could fend off attacks without changing his position. Because he became a dragon slayer, his physical abilities have increased slightly. Nozomu thought that he could also use the techniques he had learned from the master now. He remembered all the training sessions with Shino, who constantly taught him something new. He will not allow himself to be surpassed by anyone with an E rank. Mars thought angrily that with his attack speed and strength boosted by the sword's air cover, but he still hadn't found a single opportunity to counterattack. Nozomu has rank 10. Mars excitedly thought that, however, he could count his attacks 5 steps ahead. So close to the bottom you shouldn't see through it. Nozomu smiled broadly. The guy happily thought that he could finally fight him the way he wanted. Mars looked at his smile in surprise. Nozomu broke the chains. This guy's ability is suppression. It sets a constant limit for his abilities, his strength, Kai, and magic. Moreover, with these shackles, how much more he had to train to break through this wall if he had looked at his attacks without shackles with his real skills. Mars clenched his teeth angrily and thought furiously that he would not accept this. He would never accept it. He quickly ran at Nozomu, who quickly began to dodge his attacks. Nozomu lowered his sword for the next attack. Mars excitedly thought that now. He raised his giant sword high and pointed it at Nozomu, who noticed it. Mars struck, but Nozomu quickly dodged. The guy hit the ground, not his opponent. Dust rose after the impact. Mars thought angrily that this fool had done it on purpose. He needs the wind. Mars raised the sword above his head and shouted furiously that he was summoning imminent frustration. He was just furious that Nozomu had fooled him. The Kai technique, derived from the air coating of the blade, is a ram slicing through the coating. The wind blade released by the sword converges and rushes forward like a battering ram. Kai technique, lightning step dance. The lightning step is a growing type of technique that allows you to move instantly. A high-level technique that requires excellent legs and a sense of balance to fully utilize the power of a lightning-fast stride, as well as fine muscle control. Mars screamed furiously that it didn't work out where he had gone. Nozomu looked into Mars' frightened eyes. They were facing each other. Mars couldn't figure out what was going on. They've been fighting for quite a while now. Nozomu opened his sword and used his skill. Mars shouted angrily that this was the trouble. Suddenly, Nozomu hit him. The guy felt a cut that went through his whole body. The bell rang, which informed that the fight was over. Everyone turned towards Nozomu and Mars. Henry shouted that the training battle was over. Mars dropped the sword from his hands. Henry quickly moved away from Henry. The man said loudly that the final exams had been completed, so today's class was over. Nozomu put away his sword and Mars couldn't move from the shock. Henry came up to the guy with a smile and said they could talk. Nozomu replied that he was sorry, but he was busy today, so he apologized. He quickly ran away to the girls' loud screams. Mars looked after Nozomu. He wiped the dirt off his face and thought what a strange feeling it was. If he's nobody, then why is he so annoyed? It's because he was hiding his real abilities. No, it's not like that. Mars smiled and said that he understood. Compared to him, he couldn't stand those who secretly make a fuss while in the shadows. Even if he was weak and couldn't do anything, but even more this Nozomu, who just accepted everything without resistance, even if they beat him. Mars went on to argue that Nozomu was fighting and getting stronger than anyone else, and he didn't realize it. He can't even imagine how he was able to get to where he is now. The guy thought he was just using Nozomu to distract himself. This guy has definitely become stronger. No, he was strong all the time, but they just didn't realize it. Iris opened the door to the classroom and excitedly thought that rank 10 was currently having a practical lesson. Maybe she can meet if she waits at the main gate. She went outside and noticed a familiar sword on the guy. Iris screamed loudly for Nozomu to wait for her for a while. The guy didn't hear her and quickly ran away. Iris bent over and breathed heavily. She said wearily that she had not been able to talk to him again. The girl excitedly thought that she wondered why he was in such a hurry. Nozomu ran through the forest and reasoned that there were too many strangers in the city. He needs to get back as soon as possible. Something's going on. After all, during the battle with Tiamat, the guy continued to argue that the master was there and saw everything with her own eyes. He came to the teacher. Shino said with a smile that Nozomu was back. Nozomu sighed loudly. He was tired after running. The guy excitedly said that since his exam was already close, he should take it. Shino replied, well, then he can stay with her today. Shino said with a big smile that any man should accept the invitation of a beautiful girl. Nozomu took a cookie and replied that the teacher was clearly weak to alcohol. Shino grabbed his hand and told him to quickly sit down next to her. Nozomu screamed that the teacher was going to break his arm. He thought that this was just a skill of a person who was used to controlling the regulation of chi energy. Nozomu said that he was a master, but she was really a beautiful girl, though she was a little older. Shino looked at him and said they should have a little talk. The guy looked at her in surprise. Suddenly the teacher began her rambling story about how she loved her homeland and family, about how he still loves her even after such a long time. She also wanted to know about him. Where is his hometown? What kind of family does he have? What does he like? They talked about a variety of things. There were stories that the master already knew about. Nevertheless, she still wanted to hear them. Training, swordsmanship, and this art. He told her about everything he had ever known or taught. This seemingly ordinary conversation brought him a lot of joy. The most important thing for him was the time spent with the master. Shino looked at the joyful Nozomu and thought that she had no right to call herself the teacher of such a wonderful student, but she wanted to. She is sure that she would like to spend her whole life with him. If only this body did not suffer from the disease if she had been born 10 years later. She continued to reason that she was sorry that this would not happen, but he would always remain in her heart. Shino will remember their training sessions, how she taught him new techniques. She hopes that he will succeed. Shino said that okay, they would start their last training session then. Nozomu looked at her in surprise. He did not expect such words. Shino went into the woods. Nozomu asked what she meant by the ladder. The girl replied, that's what it has. This is the last training she will do for him. The essence of the last training is a duel to the death. Shocked, Nozomu asked why this was the last training session, a duel to the death. What was she talking about at all? This is some kind of cruel joke. The master must answer him. Shino said she wasn't going to explain anything. Shino looked into his eyes and asked him that besides, does it make sense to ask about the reasons for someone who seriously intends to kill him? Nozomi couldn't believe what he was hearing. Nozomu clenched his hands into fists and shouted furiously for the master to answer him. Shino ran at him like that. She wanted to hit him in the neck, but the guy managed to dodge. Nozomi tried to get away from her, but the girl kicked him. The guy flew off to the side and crashed into a tree. He quickly picked it up and angrily asked why she was doing this. Shino didn't say anything. Nozomu thought that she did not allow him to ask questions during training. He understands perfectly well, all this is for the sake of greater concentration on his part, but what can he think about now? Even if he did something now that could kill her. He had never had such thoughts before. Shino quickly went on the attack. Nozomu had to come out of his thoughts and defend himself. He quickly began to beat off her blows. He thought that she had executed a precise and fast series of punches. The guy deflected the blow and thought that if he hit, he would cut in half, so much so that there would be no wounds left. He looked at Shino and realized that her punch was aimed at her hands. Nozomu held his sword out in front of him to defend himself. Shino hit him, and the guy screamed loudly that this was a failure. He pushed off the ground and jumped back. Shino did not let him leave. She struck and struck a large number of blows. Nozomu thought that her swordsmanship, skill, physical abilities were amazing. He continued to reason that it was still. Shino grabbed her sword and hit the guy with all her might. Nozomu thought that the swordsmanship technique of the master is a complex technique in which the scabbard of the sword is combined with hand-to-hand combat. The guy dodged her blow and thought that the scabbard was reinforced with kaijutsu. For example, human bones can easily be broken. Nozomu pulled out a second sword. Nozomu deflected her blow again and thought that the force of each blow was gradually decreasing and the density of attacks was increasing. This is the main difference between his abilities and the master. The girl hit him and hit him in the stomach. Nozomu screamed and thought she had used a two-handed interception. He instantly focused his attention on it. He was numb all over. Shino hit him and Nozomu screamed loudly. The girl lifted her foot to strike. Nozomu looked at her and tensely thought that a little more and she would kill him. Shino kicked him with great force. Nozomu flew several meters away. He grabbed his own and thought that everything inside was hurting. He feels pain all over his body. The guy furiously thought that his defense was ineffective. Then we'll have to attack. The guy landed on the ground and abruptly took out his sharp sword to defend and attack. Nozomu furiously thought that his most reliable technique. He shouted that he was using a phantom. The guy stared at Shino, who was fighting against him. Suddenly, his magic dissipated. He looked in front of him to figure out what had happened. Nozomu was shocked to think that the phantom had been redirected. What nonsense. Nozomu was seriously injured. He had a huge incision all over his body. The blow also broke one of his swords. He did not expect that such a thing could happen. The guy thought that in order to intercept his phantom technique, it had to be on the same trajectory as he launched it. She had to block with the sword without deviation or delay. Nozomu fell to his knees in front of Shino. He was seriously injured. He was clutching the sword and the girl looked at him furiously. The guy thought he couldn't win. Shino screamed for him to release his energy. She added that he had to understand that this was the only way to defeat her. Nozomu looked at his wounds and thought that this was the only opportunity he had. However, that dream. Nozomu continued to speculate that this was really a view of his soul from the inside. The body may be dead, but the soul still lives inside it. Although his powers are bound by the strongest chains, his soul cannot be suppressed even by this. He thought that in order to defeat the master, he had no other choice but to attack uncontrollably with all his might. But if he did, then Tiamat could free himself. With a strong will and hatred in his eyes, Shino said she was at a loss. Shino hit Nozomu. He managed to defend himself but immediately fell to the ground. He thought that he seemed to be losing consciousness. The guy continued to argue that he couldn't hear anything anymore. The feeling of his legs and arms disappears as if he fell into cold water. Here she is death. He finally got to meet her. Nozomu looked at Shino's face and wondered why she was crying now. The girl said she was going to die soon. It's not that long now. Nozomu even came to his senses from her words. Shino said that she has a fear of falling asleep forever. Perhaps it was the battle with Tiamat that opened the wound in his body. Nozomu thought that the master might die, but why? She said she would live for one night at most. Nozomu thought that he had tried many times to break the chains of this disease. Shino said that if he had more control over his body, maybe something would work out. If they have a little time, maybe they can do something. Shino continued to say no matter how sad it was, she came here out of desperation after being betrayed by her own family. Her parents abandoned her and she came to this continent. Nozomu was shocked to think that here, he looked at her story with different eyes and saw. Shino said loudly that they were surprisingly similar in this. She said betrayal, ridiculing others and running away. She never wanted to see him again. She was glad to die alone. That's why she came to a place like this. Shino said that she spent many years in the forest. Then she met him. At first it seemed to her that he only irritated her, but then she was able to see his inner world and was very happy about it. The girl went on to say that she felt something for him that she didn't have herself. She wants to tell Nozomu her last wish. The last one she did nothing but run away from. Shino started crying and said she had to tell him something. She asked excitedly that he would accept her last request. She was asking him very much. Shino sat up and looked at her in shock. He thought that she had chosen her own path a long time ago. To convince a master to live is to pervert her desire. The guy went on to say that she had spent the last hours of her life telling him everything. The teacher, her last wish, he heard it. He thought that he had been running away from himself all his life. From what surrounded him at the academy, he ran away from reality itself, but if he ran away from the teacher's desire, he wouldn't meet her again, and more importantly, Nozomu confidently thought that she didn't want to see her cry bitterly. Nozomu stood in front of the dragon. The monster hit the ground and the guy quickly stepped aside. The dragon waved its tail. He hit the Nozomu with all his might. He flew high into the air and flew several meters. Nozomu fell to the ground and rolled on it for a bit. The dragon roared loudly and screamed. Nozomu looked at him. He was lying on the ground. Half of his body was one continuous wound. He felt a lot of pain. Nozomu glared at him. He gathered all his willpower and got up from the ground. The guy stood in front of the dragon. The monster looked at him and launched a fireball. Nozomu remembered Shino's face, which was crying. She asked him if he would accept her last request. The guy shouted furiously that he was not the one he needed. He's not his opponent. The dragon released a fireball at Nozomu. The guy took a small step and then ran to meet the danger. He ran into the epicenter of the magic sphere. He managed to get through it and remained intact. Nozomu did not stop. He continued to run quickly towards the monster. The guy ran right into the dragon's mouth. The monster shut its mouth together with the man. The guy opened his eyes and saw a bright light. He thought it was a 5-color light. This is the power of Tiamat. He was able to stand up and pick up his sword. Every action was very difficult. Shino looked at the magic table that Nozomu had created with a smile. She happily thought that here. Not everyone could cope with the power of the dragon they defeated, but the boy did it. She thought that he was resisting a huge force that was raging inside him. The guy thought that the force permeated him. My mind and body are on edge. If he fails, then this power will consume him. In the worst case, the body will be torn apart and Tiamat will be resurrected. There is no time. Nozomu shouted loudly for her to defend herself. Shino replied with a smile that "Come on, stupid student." They began to strike one after another. The girl thought that she had little chance. Shino continued to reason that she was superior to him in skill. However, now there is nothing holding back his strength. Becoming a dragon slayer, he gained incredible power. She shouted that one should be more gentle with the ladies. Nozomu shouted that it was nonsense. He doesn't see a weak girl in front of him who needs to be succumbed to. She has to remember how old she is. Shino replied that a girl is always a girl, so he was dumped. Nozomu shouted in displeasure, how dare she say such a thing? She's just as much a loser as he is. Shino shouted how dare he insult his mentor, she will teach him respect. Nozomu shouted that it was great because he was already tired of enduring her daily beatings. The guy began to strike one blow after another. He was more serious than in the first battle. Nozomu pulled out her sword and applied her skill. Nozomu thought that this was Kai's shock cannon technique. The compressed Kai is released in one direction to throw back the opponent. Shino shouted loudly for him to go to hell, misogynist. Nozomu took up a fighting stance to defend himself as well as attack Shino. He prepared to attack. Shino thought it was interesting. He raised his skill level right in the middle of the battle. Nozomu shouted that this was what he was talking about. Pretend to be an old lady and then as soon as it hits. They shouted at the same time that they were summoning the destructive strike technique. They pointed their swords at each other to take full advantage of the talent. They used the skill of the Kai destructive strike technique. If you hit an opponent with it, his organs will rupture under the simultaneous action of a shock wave. Their power caused a huge explosion. Shino shouted with a smile that it was so that he would remember his master. Nozomu shouted that she was just an ordinary fraud. Ritual magic originates in the rituals of offering prayers to the gods and spirits. Prayer also includes dancing, hence the basis of ritual techniques, the fusion of dance and martial arts. Multiple attacks resemble a kind of dance. The attacker himself awakens the magical elements surrounding him by applying ritual magic. Development of a 1,000-word ceremonial chant method for siege. This is the ritual battle dance of reincarnation. It absorbs the power of the surrounding magical elements and gives you strength over and over again. The more you dance, the stronger you become. It's just amazing. Kai technique and magic. Kai uses the physical basis of the spell. They push each other away, a combination of methods that are complete opposites. Nozomu is capable of various combinations. Outstanding Kai flow control. The synergy of fighting spirit and perfect dance. He was able to master one of the most advanced techniques in an instant. It's amazing. Shino thought that the guy was really getting stronger. In less than 2 years, he acquired the most advanced skills, withstood hellish training. There are only a few people on the continent who can defeat him. They hit each other, which caused a loud explosion. They were thrown apart. Nozomu thought that such a force would have broken an ordinary person's mind long ago. Shino thought that her Kai strength was not recovering. They hit each other, but no one wanted to give up. They hit the phantom with a flash. A blade with Kai embedded in it becomes a conductor of power. Nozomu and Shino hit each other and stopped on opposite sides. Shino fell to the ground. Nozomu shouted that he was going to the teacher. He quickly ran up to the girl. He was very scared for her. It seemed to him that she did not move. Nozomu lifted her up and the girl said with a smile that he had become stronger. She didn't think she could teach him anything. She is happy that he accepted her last request, that he gave her peace. Nozomu began to cry and looked at her with a smile. He thought that master she had taught him to train his mind, but he was still a fool. Shino told him to remember one thing. She said he could run or get stuck in place, but he shouldn't turn away from the fact that he was running from reality. He can't live with it anymore. If he forgets, he will cool down forever. She added that even if he runs away, even if he gets stuck in one place, the main thing is not to forget about it. Then whichever path he chooses, one day he will be able to move on. Nozomu cried harder and said it was okay. Shino looked at him with a smile and then closed her eyes. She said she was so tired, so she'd probably get some sleep. See you soon. Nozomu hugged her to him. Nozomu buried her. He stood in front of her grave and said that he was very grateful to her. He left the flowers and closed his eyes. He was in a lot of pain, but it was going to happen. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the forest. He took a step and then another and another. Nozomu went back to the city. A butterfly with a broken wing was watching him. At the castle, the man told Mrs. Lugata that he had something to tell her. She asked what it was. He replied that the deadline for the execution of the contract was approaching. The girl said that he was talking about the contract that her father had concluded, which one exactly he was talking about. The man replied that he had a contract with a landlord in the south of the country. It's time to collect the goods they gave them for their help. He asked what she would order. She replied that she was putting him in charge. There was no need to delay it. If they resist, he can just get rid of them. He asked her if she was sure. The girl replied that he should not dare to contradict her will. Lugate said that, by the way, she had heard about the Journes family and would be here soon. They'll have to arrange an early appointment. The man bowed and replied that he would set off immediately. She told him to go. Nozomu adjusted his keychain and thought that somehow he had come to the 3rd year. He had to take more exams than anyone in the history of the academy. As a result, he ended up at the bottom of the weakest class. He continued to reason that it was probably better to leave things as they were for now. The Dragon Slayer's power is too great to be easily mastered. The stones turn to dust from his blows. He can release his power for a maximum of 2 minutes. It won't be possible to control her any longer. Nozomu thought that it was necessary to decide what to do with Tiamat and Lisa. Nozomu clutched his sweatshirt and tensely continued to reason that to think he was still running away. He quickly headed away with the thought that he knew. He heard the students saying what else was he doing here. It's a nightmare, they're being put on the same level as this guy. He's not good for anything at all, he still won't figure out that he doesn't belong here. The Solminati Academy is a school for the most capable teenagers from all over the continent. Nozomu entered the classroom and sat down in his seat. He felt so awkward. The rules here encourage competition and personal growth. Within the academy, its own class system is being built. Despite the huge number of advantages, it has negative consequences. The most capable end up at the top. It is quite natural that they begin to look down on those who are lower. Despite his efforts, a person cannot get to the top in any way, although at home he was considered a real genius. Students stuck in the lower grades. Nozomu is at the very bottom of this distinctive society. The students looked at him in surprise when the guy stood in the center of the class and looked at everyone with a haughty look. Henry came into the classroom and shouted that good morning to everyone. Mr. Caskel was appointed 5th grade homeroom teacher. She is now responsible for their actions. She congratulates you on entering the 3rd year. She went on to say that, dear 3rd-year students, they may be offended that they got into the 1st grade from the end, but there is no need to get hung up. Henry said she worked with higher grades. They can believe her that they are no worse than the rest. Everyone here has talent, they just don't know how to use it yet. Henry looked at Nozomu and said that although some, of course, know a little more about themselves, at least they're trying to find out. Nozomu saw her smile brightly. Henry shouted that let's start a new school year. She started marking everyone. Mars stared at the back of the guy's head. He was thinking about something very serious. The girl said with a smile, well, now they will be preparing for exams in the morning, going to practical classes and attending a bunch of different events. Senior year, more worries. They came to the training hall. Nozomu thought he knew this day would come, training in combat techniques, but he has to do that. In the 3rd year, most of the practical classes are group fights. In other words, team battles. The goal is to learn how to work in a group and develop your individual combat skills. Nozomu thought he was trying to find a band, but he was just being ignored. Nozomu turned his head and saw Mars. He looked at him in shock. The students shouted that he was serious. Why would they take in a loser? Nozomu thought they would probably send him, so he didn't even ask them. Nozomu looked at him intently and said that okay, he would join in. Mars replied that it was fine. Henry shouted joyfully that they were now on the same team. The teams faced each other. Henry shouted loudly that they were ready and started. The two guys quickly ran towards Mars, who dared to repel their blows. He looked at their surprised faces with a smile. Nozomu quickly ran towards them. Suddenly, an arrow stopped him. He turned around and thought it was a wind blade. The girl shouted that she was releasing a wind blade. She separated him from another group, and another student ran at him to attack. Nozomu thought that they were trying to separate them. The guy shouted for him to receive, but Nozomu easily deflected the blow. Nozomu was about to punch him in the stomach when suddenly a fireball hit him. The opponent quickly ran away from him. Nozomu looked surprised and thought it was a fireball, but who? An archer from his team asked what if they hit him. He doesn't think it's a good idea. The guy replied that okay, he was useless anyway, let him be the bait. Nozomu looked at them angrily and said that everything was bad for them. The opponent attacked him from behind. Nozomu managed to defend himself as they tried to attack him from the other side too. The opponent hit him and shouted joyfully that they were attacked by a fireball. Nozomu thought that it was not enough, that he needed to defend himself from enemy attacks. So the allies also bombed from the back. He continued to reason that they were working in pairs. While one was just getting a new arrow, the other was already preparing to use the spell. They came up with a great idea. You can't say anything, they asked for it. Nozomu swung his sword and hit two opponents at once. The guy and the girl cried out in surprise. Nozomu quickly turned around and ran towards his allies. The archers released fireballs and excitedly shouted where he had gone. The guy approached them and hit them so that they dropped their weapons. The guy screamed in fright, what is it? Nozomu punched the guys in the stomach. He turned his head and noticed a couple from another team approaching them. He felt a strong magical power. The couple screamed in fright, where did this aura come from? Mars quickly approached them and waved his sword. He quickly knocked them down. Nozomu and Mars faced each other. Nozomu looked at him in shock. The guys from their team said that this is Mars, which is to be expected. Nozomu thought he would have hurt him too, if he hadn't taken advantage of the instantaneous jerk. The couple hid behind the guy's back. Nozomu looked at them angrily. He put into his gaze all the hatred he felt for them. Henry came up from behind the guys. Nozomu looked at Mars and thought, why did he invite him to join their team? What is going on in Mars' head? He cannot understand. Henry punished the traitors from Nozomu's team. Mars went outside and went about his business. He thought he had changed. The guy passed by a large number of students, but they were not interesting to him. It turns out that Nozomu is a great fighter. He was only in the blind spots of the opponents, constantly moving to be one-on-one with them. This guy was able to handle the attacks of all four of them. Mars continued to speculate about where he got such an experience. Did he really go to the forest all this time? This is the only place where you can still get practical experience. He needs to check it out. Someone's footsteps are heard. The main character notices that as soon as he left the hostel, he immediately felt himself being followed. She didn't disappear even when he reached the city center. However, the young man felt that there was no malicious intent coming from her. Nozomu Bounty decided that he would throw his pursuer off his tail if he went into the forest. Despite this possibility, the main character still had a bad feeling. This was also due to the fact that the young man kept a secret. The young man worries that someone might recognize him as a dragon slayer. This thought scares the main character. If it is so obvious to get rid of persecution, then problems may arise, he understands. Although the young man does not want to lead a stranger to the hut of the master either. The young man thinks that he will have to look at the pursuer himself. The main character decides to fulfill his plan and turns the corner of the house. From a dark corner, the man who has been following him all this time looks after him. The young man turns abruptly and boldly looks into the eyes of his pursuer. The young man realizes with annoyance that his worst fears have come true and he has been noticed. Meanwhile, the pursuer comes out of the shadows. Nozomu is surprised to see who has been following him all this time. Obviously, he had already seen this man and was familiar with him. This hero was a classmate of the young man, a notorious bully named Mars. The young man silently approaches the main character. The hero turns to his classmate and asks why he is following him. He asks the main character what he means. Mars explains that he just wanted to make sure of something. The main character asks his interlocutor what he wanted to make sure of. At this moment, Mars grabs his weapon. The young man does not expect this and is surprised, trying to figure out what he is up to. The attacker takes off and rushes at him. The boy's classmate swings a sword at Nozomu Bounty to strike the young man. The main character decides to defend himself and also draws his sword. Two young men come together in battle. They are both pretty strong opponents and can compete well with each other. Nozomu jumps back to a safe distance and asks the opponent what he is doing. Mars tells him that he only wants to get an answer to his question. The main character shouts at him, asking why in that case Mars pointed a sword at him. The pursuer does not answer anything and only looks at the young man from under his brows. He's obviously angry about something. Nozomu Bounty is preparing to repel another attack from the enemy, who swoops down on him again. The main character draws attention to the fact that during the swing, Mars did not even stagger, although his sword was huge and should have outweighed the young man. Nozomu Bounty dodges the attack again and notices that the opponent has delivered a series of strikes, making them as smooth as possible. The main character celebrates the skill of his classmate. The heroes continue the duel. The young man skillfully repels the enemy's attack, putting him in a difficult position. The sword of Mars crashes into the ground after a swing. The main character presses the young man's sword with his foot, thereby disarming the opponent. The young man raises his katana over the pursuer. The opponent suddenly lets go of the weapon, surprising Nozomu Bounty with this. Mars chooses to act with a different tactic. The young man gathers a stream of energy in his fist. Mars lets out a war cry and strikes with the help of the wind fist technique. This is a technique in which the wind accumulates in the attacker's fist and increases the force of the blow with it. Also, this wind flow can be used to literally blow away the enemy. That is why this technique is very versatile. Mars uses this feature. The characters stop in front of each other to take a short pause and collect their thoughts. Mars realizes that, although he surpasses the young man in strength, he cannot hit him. The hero either fends off the young man's attacks or evades them. He almost hits Mars a couple of times. In fencing, a young man is an order of magnitude higher than a bully. Mars wants to know how Nozomu achieved such a level of mastery even under the influence of suppressed abilities. The young man decides that if he learns the secret of the main character, he will become stronger. The pursuer knows that he will become more than just strong. He will become much stronger by gaining the same abilities as his classmate. He is slowly approaching the main character. He is surprised by such a sharp change in the behavior of the attacker. "I'm sorry for attacking unexpectedly," says Mars approaching the hero. The young man looks at him incredulously. The approaching man tells the hero that he has a question for him. A friend of the main character asks how he achieved such mastery. The young man clarifies whether his interlocutor means possession of a blade. He answers in the affirmative. The main character explains that he once had a mentor who taught him at one time, and did it from the very first year of study. Mars asks the young man if he can meet this mentor. The young man only shakes his head negatively when he hears this question. He has already died, explains Nozomu Bounties to his interlocutor. He sadly replies that he understood the hero. The pursuer is trying to figure out exactly how this mentor trained the main character, making him so dexterous. The young man says that his training took place with a real sword. In class, he ran away and caught up with monsters, and then participated in deadly battles with Shino. Mars is surprised at this level of training difficulty and asks the main character how he managed to survive in such difficult conditions. He shrugs and says he doesn't know how it happened. Now everything is falling into place. Incredible mastery of the blade, precision of movement, judgment on the battlefield. So the fencing technique and tactical abilities of the main character were taught by his master. Mars understands. He noticed that the young man was constantly shuffling to avoid being surrounded and continue the one-on-one fight. Nozomu learned this by fighting packs of wild animals. This painful experience resulted in the ability to do whatever it takes to survive, whether he wants to or not. After all, during training with the master, where the slightest delay could cost him his life, he mastered the art of making quick and correct decisions. The young man turns to the hero and asks him why he was dragging himself after him. He's sorry not to say that he attacked him just to ask about it. Mars mumbles uncertainly and does not know where to start his story. The hero looks at him questioningly. The stalker hesitantly begins to say that he wanted to say something to the hero. At this moment, his speech is interrupted by a woman's scream which is addressed to him. The girl calls him her brother. The heroes turn around and see the heroine, who asks the pursuer what he has done, inviting the main character into such a wilderness. He answers that he hadn't thought of anything and asked his sister what she had left here at all. The girl replies that when she was walking from the market, she saw her brother, who was wandering around the city with a scary face. She decided to follow him. It turned out to be for good reason, because she saw her brother trying to rob someone. Marsa gets angry and asks his sister why he would rob someone. She replies that, given her brother's behavior, this is quite logical. She starts telling him off. The young man is surprised that his younger sister behaves like this. The girl complains that she is no longer allowed into her favorite store because her brother once organized a pogrom there. Because of the elder, the heroine has to apologize to all the neighbors. He surpassed the inveterate bully in the hero class. The girl continues to yell at her brother, saying that he urinated in his pants longer than she did and once scared a horse by jumping into a cart. The hero becomes embarrassed by what he hears. The girl apologizes to him for her brother, but the young man says that it's not worth it. The heroine remembers that she forgot to introduce herself. She says her name is Ina Dickens, and she is the younger sister of a familiar character. The girl considers her brother a quitter and does not hesitate to scold him in public. Nozomu greets the girl and tells her his name. He talks about being Mars' classmate. The girl offers the hero to visit them as an apology. She says they have their own inn with a tavern. She says she will at least give the young man dinner. The young man protests, but the heroine replies that she does not want to be in his debt, so he has to agree to have dinner with them. The heroes find themselves at home. Ina greets a woman named Hannah. She happily welcomes her to the tavern. The girl tells her that her brother was bothering someone again, so she had already scolded him. She introduces the main character, saying that this is the same poor guy who had to endure Mars. Hannah, in turn, apologizes for the jerk and asks the young man to sit down. As an apology, she promises to give him a delicious dinner. The woman grabs Mars by the ear and takes him away, saying that he is coming with her. The young man resists and screams in pain, telling her to get off him. The hero decides that they went to the kitchen. He hears the maid clinking utensils and assumes that the woman hit Mars with something heavy. The young man thanks Ina for bringing him a glass of water. Hannah asks him to help himself and presents the main character with the signature dish of the bull's head. A steak from a digger rabbit with salad. Of course, it's on the house, she jokes, commanding the young man, who does not dare to touch the food, to fly into the dish. The young man knows that digger rabbits live in the forests and meadows of the suburbs. As the name suggests, they live in dug-in holes. The locals hunt these animals because of their tender meat. The young man praises the delicious food. The woman promises that she will tell her husband that he liked it very much. She asks Ina to help her in the kitchen because new visitors are coming soon. She instructs the girl to wash the dishes. Hannah turns to the main character. She clarifies that the young man said his name was Nozomu. The woman says she wanted to talk to him about something and asks the young man if he has a minute to do it. He asks her what it is. Hannah tries to find out what the hero thinks about Mars and Ina. The young man thinks hard and answers that it is difficult for him to answer this question right away. He had only met Ina today, but he had already realized that she had a head on her shoulders. This is probably due to the behavior of Mars. As for him, the hero didn't know what to say. Mars doesn't think much of him and doesn't try to hide it. However, recently, a classmate began to treat him in a different way. Hannah replies that she thought so. She noticed that he hadn't been himself for months. Everything was clear to her now. The woman admitted that her heart felt better when the hero told her about Mars. It's nice to know that he still wants to be friends with someone, she notes. The hero is surprised. Hannah says Mars didn't mind the young man coming. She explains to Nozomu that Mark probably won't tell him this to his face, however, he probably wants to make friends with him. The woman says that it seems to her that the boy mistreated the hero and now does not know how to apologize to him. According to Hannah, Mars has never brought any of his bully buddies to his house. The main character asks himself if his classmate has finally understood something. Nozomu Bounty knows that Mark has been doing the wrong thing all this time. The bully's father repeatedly told him that the family had to blush for him and asked when it would end. He asks Mars if he wasn't himself because of the kid who came to their house. Judging by the sour face of the hero, he lost to a young man. Mark turns to him in surprise and asks how he guessed. The man sighs and says that he has been replacing his father for many years. He says that Mars does not know how to lose but does not have time to finish the thought. The young man interrupts him, shouting that this is not the case at all. He says he just wanted to find out how the main character became so strong. The man wonders if it was really impossible to just ask and not arrange this circus. Mars wonders if he has the right to just ask the hero something. He thinks he's a lousy bully. The man teases the young man, asking if he has finally realized who he is. The guy doesn't like it. The father says that his son goes to the best school in Solminati, but imagines about himself who knows what and is afraid of obstacles. Mars sighs with displeasure and says that his father hasn't changed a bit. The father also notices that during the antics his son never crossed the line of no return. However, the boy was never able to open up to anyone except his family. The man believes that the death of his mother and the departure of his real father still pull the young man into the past. Even if Mars did it out of guilt, however, it was the first time in many years that he brought a man of his own age to the tavern. The man assumes that his wayward adopted son finally wants to make a friend. He reminds the guy not to forget to apologize to the main character. He replies that he knows everything. Leaving the tavern, the hero thanks for the delicious treats. The heroes call him to come to the tavern next time. His sister asks him to look after his older brother, and Hannah pushes Mars to accompany the young man. The heroes walk towards the young man's house. Mars gathers his thoughts and then says the words of apology for everything he has done. The main character turns to him in surprise, and Hannah's words suddenly come to his mind that Mars never brought his friends to the tavern. The hero realizes that his classmate does not want to involve his family in his dirty business. He saw a new side of the guy that he doesn't show at school. However, now the main character knows that he is not indifferent to someone else's pain. Besides, he doesn't seem to know about the young man's secret. It didn't look like Mark wanted to expose him. Nozomu accepts his classmate's apology. Mars thanks him for his understanding. The young man continues his speech and says that it is not human to take offense at someone who has been humiliated by his own sister. He lets out a laugh, while an indignant Mars glares at him. He menacingly asks the main character who he just laughed at. The young man apologizes but says that it is really difficult to forget, so he will laugh every time he remembers it. Mars shouts at him to make Nozomu Bounties forget everything quickly. They get into an altercation and one asks the other what he is doing. What a joy! Nozomu and Mars are now best friends. The girl exclaims enthusiastically when she sees the heroes peacefully eating breakfast at school. Another girl comes up to her and says she's overdoing it again. The heroine does not cease to be touched by them. When the main character was dragged to the infirmary to have lunch, Mars was already there. Nozomu was surprised that he was also called. As soon as the young man started talking to Mars more often, the atmosphere in the classroom changed. The students who had always bullied him now only glared at him from afar. Mars' friends stopped following him around. Gradually, the characters began to spend more time together and pair up in a practical lesson. The young man still does not understand why Madame Henry is so delighted with this. One of the teachers explains to the hero that she was worried not only for him, but also for Mars. Recently, she even said that he turns out to be not a bad boy. Mars asks her why she decided that. The woman says that she noticed at the end of the second year that the young man stopped picking on Nozomu. It looked as if the hero had reflected on his behavior and decided to measure himself against him. A kid like that can't be a bad boy, Ms. Henry says. The main character knows that Madame Henry is terribly perceptive. She's done this to him more than once. At that moment, a girl comes into the infirmary and asks if Dr. Norn is here. She says that one of the students at the school had an injury and asks if the heroes can help her. The views of the girl and the main character meet. He sees a familiar face and realizes that Iristina is in front of him. The heroine addresses Nozomu by name and notices that they haven't seen him for a long time. The young man looks at her in confusion, and something turns over in his soul. He awkwardly agrees with Iristina, arousing suspicion from others with his uncertain tone. The main character realizes that in front of him is the Princess of the Night herself. At this time, Henry asks him if he knows the girl and what he has done to her. Mars says that the young man can tell him everything. Nozomu says something made her angry. He realizes that he made the heroine lose her temper at the moment when he ran away from her. The young man does not understand why she is so angry, because they are not so close that she is annoyed by such trifles. At this moment, a lot of thoughts arise in the girl's head, so they finally met Nozomu. She was so busy with the exams that she couldn't even go look for him. She was almost out of patience. The girl from behind calls out to Iris, reminding her that the schoolgirl needs help. The heroine quickly comes to her senses. The schoolgirl is seated in the infirmary. Dr. Norn asks what happened. Iris says that the girl was practicing magic and the spell exploded right on her hand. Norn says that the girl lost a lot of blood. However, fortunately, the bones and muscles remained intact. Just in case the hand needs to be treated with healing magic and medicine, she concludes. The doctor tells the schoolgirl to come back if the discomfort in her arm persists after a few days. Nozomu Bounty draws attention to the third girl who helped Iris carry the victim to the infirmary. The girl meets his gaze and hides behind the Princess of the Night. Mars glares at her. The main character asks him to take it easy and asks what's the matter. Mars just shrugs it off. The girl timidly hides behind Iris. Mentally, Mars notices that the girl is above him in rank, but she is still afraid of him. This is very annoying for the hero. The girl thinks that he is even scarier than a forest monster. Iris turns to the schoolgirl and says that, as the doctor said, it is better for her to refrain from magical training for a while. The girl thanks her rescuers for bringing her to the infirmary. She is proud that Iristina herself saw her off. Iris turns to Nozomu and thanks him for his help. He refuses and says that he accidentally ended up in the infirmary. The girl takes advantage of the fact that they are both here and asks if she can talk to him. The hero asks again if she really wants to talk here. The girl replies that it is better to do it alone if possible. Dr. Norn says that the heroes can go to the storeroom. Medicines are stored there, so no one will interfere, she explains. Iris turns to the young man and says that she wanted to apologize. She says that when the three of them had lunch with Samia, she began to ask the hero rude questions, not knowing all the circumstances. Iris is very sorry about this. The young man says that he should apologize to her for getting angry and just leaving that time. He turns to Thelma and asks why she is here. She replies that she also wanted to apologize to him. The girl says that he saved her life in the forest and she just behaved terribly with him. The girl is ashamed to remember this. Eros explains that, as she has already said, Thelma is afraid of guys, and rumors about Nosoma have not added to her confidence. The hero replies that there is nothing wrong with that because she has already apologized. In addition, the hero believes that the girl's faith in the rumors about him explains everything. As soon as the hero looks away from the past, which he is trying to forget, an image of a girl who played a big role in his life appears in his memory. He realizes that he is still running away from reality. Iris asks the young man if he is all right. Nozomu replies that nothing happened and suggests that the girls return. Iris asks the hero if he will introduce them to his friends. The young man introduces the girls to his classmate Mars Dickens and their homeroom teacher, Madame Henry. Iristina pays attention to Mars and, chuckling, notices that the main character has a friend with a character. Mars looks at her with displeasure, but after calling the main character, he humbles himself and only clicks his tongue, thereby scaring Thelma. Mars Dickens sits down on the windowsill, demonstrating his obstinate character. Iris turns to Nozomu, reminding him that Samia's birthday is coming soon. She remembers that it seems Samia told the hero about it. Her classmates will be there mostly, but she wants to invite the young man too. Since it's the birthday of someone from the Franchild family, there will probably be a lot of people there, Nozomu decides. He asks Iris if she's sure he should go. She asks him not to worry. She says that only family and close friends will be there. She says that the hero is also a friend of Samia, so there is no problem with that. She asks if they should expect a hero. He agrees to come. The girl says that Samia will be very happy. Iris remembers Mars Dickens and asks the young man what he thinks about himself. Mars is surprised. Thelma, horrified, asks what is going on. The young man thinks that the heroine is mocking him. He says that he does not remember when he managed to make friends with her or her sister, and says that he has never seen the birthday girl. Iris explains that she wants to invite him because he is Nozomu's friend. He replies that he does not belong to the number of people who go to ostentatious receptions for the nobility. The girl tells Mars Dickens that she has heard a lot about him. She notices that from the manner of the hero's speech, you can immediately hear that problems are not just following him around. Eris asks how it is that he is having lunch with someone like Nozomu, who is bullied by everyone who is not lazy. They make a rather strange duo. Mark may be as rude as he seems, but he has common sense, she sums up. The young man looks at the heroine from under his brows. She continues to talk, surprising Nozomu with her exact words that Mars has it written on his forehead as if he is a lonely stray dog. The young man says that she can talk with her tongue. She replies that she would not have weight in high circles where it is necessary by status. She says she won't be offended if the hero refuses the offer. Iris says that if her friends do come, she promises to show herself the most hospitable hostess they have ever seen. The food will also be at the highest level. The heroine and her friends leave. Nozomu turns to Mars and asks if he will go with him. He replies that the hero will not wait for this. The young man notices that there was a feeling that Dickens was too strict with Thelma. He replies that people like her infuriate him the most. He compares the girl to a strong but timid doe. Norn asks if a girl shouldn't be afraid of anything because of her strength, because it doesn't always work. She says that excessive force can be a reason for fear. To know Thelma's magic is frighteningly dangerous, the doctor adds. Her words that most likely the girl had to go through a lot make the characters think about the excessive force. Nozomu Bounty recalls a story from his life, when he suddenly realized what destructive power he was endowed with. On the way home, the main character was thinking about Somia's upcoming birthday and thinking about what to give her. He remembers the girl's bracelet and how much she values it, because it is a gift from her beloved sister. The young man hopes that he will have enough time to choose a gift. After a while, he finds what he needs. The main character examines the find and decides that he can do something similar for his girlfriend. He mentally turns to the teacher and hopes that he will not mind if he borrows something from him. The hero takes the copper parts from the belt, which he has not worn for a long time. Having gathered all the accessories together, the young man begins to create. He tries very hard but does not immediately achieve the desired result. The young man does not give up and decides to try again, staying up late at night at work. The action takes place in front of the palace of the Franchild family. Because of its luxury, the characters do not immediately realize that they have come to the right place. Ina turns to her brother and asks him not to freak out at a party. The hero asks Ina what she's doing here if she's not going to a birthday party. It turns out that after that very day, Ina was furious when she found out that Mars had intimidated Thelma. Without realizing it, she strengthened her body with techniques and tried to finish off her brother. The girl says they are here to apologize for his behavior to Thelma. She's serious about it. The main character looks at Mars in surprise. He asks him not to make a face like he's some kind of coward. He says he wanted to apologize himself, but his sister decided to check on him anyway. She says that if he had gone alone, he would have done something again. Brother and sister start fighting. The girl says that she does not need an overgrown cudgel, and the guy shouts that she is not his mother. The hero tries to calm them down. A maid comes out to them and asks them not to make noise under the gates of the mansion. The young man apologizes for his comrades and says that they came to Somaliana for her birthday. The girl clarifies whether the characters are invited. She looks at her friends unfriendly and says that she is very sorry, but they do not let suspicious people into the house. At this moment, Iristina appears. She holds the gate and tells the maid that these are her friends whom she will see off herself. The girl dismisses the servants. The hero thanks Iris. She answers him that she should not send away the guests whom she invited herself. She sees her brother and sister and suggests Nozomu to call them. The young man asks his friends how long they will be fighting for, and says that they are already coming in. The heroes fly up to the gate. Mars asks why his friend didn't interrupt them earlier. It's a shame, says Ina, embarrassed. Iris coughs and asks Nozomu to introduce her and the girl to each other. The young man remembers that the girls do not know each other and introduces Iristina Franchild and Ina Dickens to each other. Thelma Lime also gives her name and says that she is pleased to meet the guest. Ina asks admiringly, is she really the same Thelma? The girl apologizes to her for her brother. Thelma says you shouldn't worry so much, but Ina thinks you can't get away with this. She turns to Mars and asks where his apologies are. He replies that she is not his mother, and because of his sister, it is even more difficult for him to talk to Thelma. The girl starts swearing at him again, saying that he can't even apologize himself. The young man replies that he would have done without her. Nozomu is trying to separate his friends. Iris, who has been watching the quarrel of the heroes all this time, begins to laugh out loud. The brother and sister fall silent in surprise. Thelma looks at her in surprise and notices that she has never heard the girl laugh so loudly before. The heroine calms down and apologizes for her laughter. She says that the brother and sister must be very close. She turns to Ina and asks the girl if she would like to honor her sister's holiday with her presence. The girl awkwardly replies that she has never been to receptions in such luxurious palaces. She says she just decided to apologize for her brother and didn't even dress up. Ina is worried that she doesn't have a birthday present with her. Iris replies that only close people are invited to today's holiday, so do not worry about clothes. At such celebrations, attention and sincere wishes are much more important than a gift. Mars adds that he paid for the gift, but his sister chose it anyway. She chose all sorts of sweets as a gift. The girl paid for them with her brother's pocket money taken by force. The girl agrees to accept the invitation, making sure that she will not be a burden to the hosts. Iris says that she will take the guests to the hall and invites them to follow her. Ina worries that there will be a commotion in the tavern due to the fact that she will not return immediately, but the hero calms her down, saying that they are only here for a couple of hours. The girl asks if she should send a messenger. One of the maids in the palace says that she will have to take the swords of the heroes. The friends follow Iris through the huge corridors of the castle. The girl leads them into one of the halls and says that the celebration will take place here. She promises that the event will start soon and asks the heroes to wait a minute. The heroes inspect the interior of the hall. There are servants everywhere ready to start serving guests at any moment. The table was covered with delicious dishes. The sound of small feet is heard, and her younger sister runs up to Iris. The girl bends down to her and gently hugs the birthday girl. The audience is touched by this scene. One of the maids sighs, wiping tears from her eyes. Iris asks the guests to forget about their usual duties for tonight and have fun. She thanks everyone for agreeing to come and celebrate her little sister's birthday. The guests begin to sort out their treats and approach the birthday girl to congratulate her on the holiday. Ina tastes the meat and admires its taste. She would really like to have such a dish served in their tavern, but understands that the ingredients alone will make them bankrupt. The main character admires the girl's enthusiasm. Mark's sister is carefully studying the dish to try to repeat it. Her brother says that she is the one who comes up with new dishes for their tavern. The heroes decide to keep up and also try the treats. It's creepy how delicious it is, Nozomu says. Mark replies that this taste cannot even be expressed in words. The young men collect plates full of food to taste each dish. They notice their peer, who also picked up a hollow plate of treats. Sister Iris notices the main character and runs up to him. They say hello, and the young man wishes the baby a happy birthday. The girl smiles radiantly and thanks her friends for the fact that they all came to her for her holiday. The birthday girl turns to Nozomu Bounty and asks him to tell her who came with him. The friends of the main character give their names. Ina says she is glad to meet Lady Somaliana and adds that she and her brother were invited by Lady Iristina. The girl smiles amiably and says that she can be addressed as just a friend. The simpler the better, the birthday girl thinks. Mars calls the girl his little sister and says it's nice to meet her. Ina is ready to attack her older brother, but Samia calms her down and says that she doesn't mind being called that. Thelma asks the guys to be a little quieter because they are not alone in the hall. Iris approaches the main character and asks him if he likes their palace. He answers in the affirmative. He points to the brother and sister and asks if it's time to separate the two. The girl replies that this is not worth doing, then that, judging by the scene at the gate, this is a common thing for them. In addition, the heroine notices that her younger sister is amused by the screams of the main character's friends. She agrees that Thelma has a hard time, but there is nothing wrong with such behavior. The main character stares at the girl. Air seems very beautiful to him, especially now when she's standing with her profile turned to him. The heroine turns to the young man and asks if everything is all right. The hero flinches from surprise. He replies that nothing happened and blushes with shame and awkwardness. The girl approaches her interlocutor and examines the object in his hands. She asks if this is a gift, by any chance, for her little sister. Nozomu Bounty says that it is. Iris says that Somia has been waiting for this gift for a very long time, so the girl reminds the main character not to forget to give it to the birthday girl a little later. There is noise and chatter all over the hall. The characters communicate with each other and have fun in the palace. Iris remembers that she forgot to tell the young man something. The girl turns to him and says that she forgot to thank him. Nozomu Bounties asks the heroine what she wanted to express gratitude for. Unexpectedly for the young man, she replies that she is grateful to him for coming to her sister. She says the family is celebrating Samia's birthday, but she looks especially happy today. The girl assumes that her little sister is so cheerful due to the appearance of the main character at the holiday. The young man looks at the baby carefully. Iris says that Somia is extremely perceptive. She sees people's true intentions as well as her sister, although she has not spent much time in high society. A lot of people are looking for benefits in it for themselves. The girl tells that their mother died immediately after giving birth to Samia. That's why Iris tried to replace her, but her sister still misses her mother. She always gets sad as her birthday approaches. Today, everything is completely different, the heroine notes. She is sure that this is the result of a meeting with Nozomu Bounties. Samia talks a lot about him even in the mansion. Iris tells what her sister told her about meeting a strange but kind hero. The young man is surprised by the words of his friend, but continues to doubt that the girl has changed so much only because of his presence. Iris repeats to him once again that Somia is very sensitive. The girl says that these servants have been living with them since they moved to Arkhazam, but even they treat them with some degree of prejudice. That is why, while the main character is in the city, Iris asks him to forget about the status of Somia. The young man says that he was just thinking about changing his attitude towards her, but now he will obey the heroine's request and continue to communicate with the birthday girl as before. The girl smiles and thanks her friend, calling him very kind. The hero replies that he doesn't think he can be called kind. The girl replies that her words are true. It's not just that he agreed to comply with the request. Many, hearing about the death of the mother of the heroines, begin to communicate with them not sincerely. The girl is grateful to the main character for not doing this. The young man replies that he just didn't know what to say. Iris asks the young man if it's true that he put himself in her place and decided not to try to smooth things over. The people who judge him at the academy don't know at all what he really is, the girl decides. She says that he is even too kind, because the main character stays at the academy only because he worries about his childhood friend Lisa. The heroine is sure that the rumors that are circulating around the academy are just dirty gossip. The girl has no proof, but her gut tells her that this is exactly what it is. The young man asks her what Iris means. The girl replies that her instincts are very rarely wrong. She looks conspiratorially at Nozomu Bounties, making the young man smile. The girl smiles back at him. Suddenly, Somia's scream is not heard all over the hall. She asks her brother and sister to stop fighting. The characters turn in surprise in their direction. The girl turns to her sister and Nozomu to do something. Iris tells the main character that the princess is calling her, so she will have to go away and help her. The young man replies that he will stop Mars. Meanwhile, the action shifts to the street. The maid asks the man at the gate who he is. He apologizes for the late arrival and asks to tell the hostess that he has important business with her. The girl replies that today the manor is celebrating the birthday of the younger sister of the mistress, so she can't do it. She suggests that he contact the mistress after the reception. The man continues to insist on his own. The maid asks the unknown man to tell her more about the purpose of his visit. He apologizes and says that the lady forbade him to discuss this issue with third parties. The girl does not have time to answer anything. There's nothing to be done, says the stranger. He snaps his fingers and the maid falls unconscious. He lays her down carefully on the ground and says that he is very sorry, but this is another order from his mistress. With a single movement of his hand, the man creates a magic field inside the castle grounds and moves outside the gate. The main character makes a toast, saying that on the occasion of Somia's birthday they have prepared a lot of things. At this moment, the door opens and an unknown man slowly enters the hall. The hero turns to look at him. The stranger confidently walks through the hall, giving the impression that he was invited to a celebration. The young man turns to Iristina and asks the girl if she invited this strange man. She watches the guest closely and replies that she does not. All eyes are on the intruder. Everyone is watching with interest and waiting for events to develop. Iris comes closer to the man and asks him who he is. She says she doesn't remember this person being on the guest list. The unknown person replies that he is sincerely sorry for such a rude intrusion. He says that he is the butler of one of the noble families of another state. He says his name is Lugato. He turns to the girl and asks if he understood correctly that in front of him are the mistresses of the estate of Iristina and Samaliana. The heroine replies that everything is correct. She really is Iristina Fransold, the owner of this estate, and her younger sister Somia is behind her. She asks the purpose of Lugato's visit. The girl expresses to the butler her displeasure at his intrusion. The man agrees with the words of the hostess and says that he would like to talk to the sisters alone. The main character is amazed at the audacity of an uninvited guest who broke into Somia's birthday party. The man demands that the young man introduce himself to him. He says he works for the Wadzart family of the Dysart Empire. The purpose of his visit is to convey to the girls extremely important messages from his mistress. Iris hears about the Dysart Empire and asks again. She knows that this is a snowy country in the northwest of the Arkmal continent, surrounded by mountains. This power is extremely powerful. Founded by 7 tribes that have been persecuted by other races in the past, this state does not interfere in the politics of other countries. At one time, the empire repelled hordes of demons. Meanwhile, the butler continues his speech. He says he came to return the treasure they lent to the Fransold family, the crucible of the spiritual flame. A crucible of spiritual flame, the heroine asks again. The man answers in the affirmative. He says it's a treasure that allows you to capture the souls of living beings and use their power. It originally belonged to the family of its owners. Lugado notices that this artifact is fused with the soul of Lady Samaliana. He says he has to return it. Iris rushes towards her sister and shouts for the man to stop, but he says that these are the terms of the contract. The girl shields her sister with her body. Everyone present rushes in their direction to protect the birthday girl. The main character watches the butler and realizes that he needs to get out of the palace as soon as possible. He feels an incredible amount of magic. Suddenly, the main character is knocked down by a shock wave. People around also feel this unknown force and grab each other. They watch in surprise and ask each other what just happened. The young man realizes that this is very similar to barrier magic. It weakens all enemies located within a certain territory. In other words, it's a magic circle. Nozomu Bounty is trying to figure out if Lugado has covered the entire Fransold family mansion. The butler says he is terribly sorry that he had to resort to such methods. However, in order to return the artifact, he needs to extract the soul of Lady Somia. Samia asks what he means when he says that. The man replies that 300 years ago, the head of their family signed a contract with the Wadzart family. Iris does not understand what kind of contract we are talking about. She was wrong when she thought she knew the history of their family. The man continues to talk, telling that the Wadzarts went to meet their ancestors and helped solve the problem that the Fransolds faced. One of the magic items they borrowed was a spiritual flame furnace. The butler shows the girls the contract. It says that magical items owned by the Wizard family will be lent to the Fransold family in exchange for a certain amount. The Fransold family undertakes to return them at the end of the specified period. As evidence of a mutual agreement and a symbol of the agreement itself, an oath bracelet will be prepared, which the Fransold family undertakes to keep. Hearing this, Samia turns pale with horror. Upon expiration of the contract, the bracelet will summon the executor from the Wizard family to complete the contract and return the magic items. The contract ends with these words. Iris draws attention to the fact that at the bottom, there is a seal with the Fransold's family coat of arms, which can only be used by the head of the family. The man says that during the return it will be necessary to extract the soul itself, so Samaliana will die. However, this is also spelled out in the condition, he says. The butler asks to be allowed to proceed with the execution of the contract. Iris asks him to stop, but the man is already starting to act. With the help of magic, he rips off Somia's bracelet. The girl does not understand what is happening. A huge monster with a human skull appears out of nowhere. This is the familiar of the contract. He is responsible for the successful execution of the contract and is the guardian of the artifact, explains the butler. He asks those present not to be afraid. This releases chains towards the girl and entangles her name. Lugado calms her down, saying that everything will end without pain and suffering. The older sister decides to defend Samia to the very end. She rushes at the monster and surprises the butler with her behavior. The guardian of the artifact uses the Shackle of Darkness spell. This is a medium-level spell of darkness that binds a target with black targets that emit light. Iris attacks the guards of the artifact and stabs him with a sword, trying with all her might to fight off her little sister. However, the monster turns out to be stronger and throws the heroine back. The girl turns to her friend Thelma and commands her, saying that it is time to act. The friend immediately begins to use her magic. With the help of a quadruple seal, the circles of the 4 elements combine to form a complex barrier that locks the victim inside. There is a rattle of chains and a growl of dissatisfaction from the guardian of the artifact. An amazing spell, says the butler, clapping your hands. The monster can't move, trapped by the spell. The man says that each attribute circulates without rejection, eventually forming a strong barrier. He notes that although he has lived a long life, he has not yet seen anyone who could use a spell of this level. The man also praises Iristina's spell, saying that she was able to detain the familiar, even if not for long. And yet he continues, trying to stop the familiar won't help. The butler creates something like a portal. He strikes Thelma first. Huge blades fly out of the portal, plunging into everything that gets in their way. Iris deftly evades Lugado's attacks. At this moment, Thelma thinks about how painful and scary she is, but the girl realizes that if her spell dissipates, then Somia will die. She can't let that happen because the girl is her best friend's sister. As a child, so much magic was awakened inside the girl that she could not control it. She was scared and felt helpless. Because of this, Thelma had only dark thoughts on her mind. Even after admission to ecology, nothing has changed. Despite the abilities that allowed her to master the four elements perfectly, she did not know how to connect with others with such potential for magic. At some point, Iris spoke to her. The girl was very scared at first, but then she looked at the heroine. She politely asked if Thelma had a minute. Since then, both heroines have been very well spared and have become best friends for each other. For Thelma, Iris became a guiding star in the night sky, and Somia became the sun that dispels darkness. They were the only light among all the darkness and loneliness that envelops the heroine. The butler turns to the girls and asks if they are thinking of giving up. The heroines have not only a talent for magic, but also indomitable willpower. Iris notices that the man controls the magic swords with the help of various spells. They become more difficult with increasing power, types of magic, and the number of spells themselves. Thelma sees the butler pointing his swords at her to deliver a second and final blow. The girl realizes that if she moves, the days will break out of her spell. The heroine bravely continues to restrain the keeper of the artifact, realizing that perhaps these are the last minutes of her life. At the most crucial moment, help comes from where you did not expect. Mars changes the direction of the blades, flying at the girl with one blow. The heroine is surprised that it was he who stood up for her in a difficult moment, because he knows that the young man does not like her. The young man turns to Thelma and asks her to focus on her spell. He promises that he will deal with the butler himself. The girl agrees and thanks the hero for saving her. The main character at this time decides to distract the monster's attention. He understands that with his abilities he can do little to help. Without a weapon, the young man just gets in the way of his friends. Suddenly, the young man hears the cry of Mars, who asks the new one to bring their swords. Iris turns to the main character and tells him to catch the key to the weapon vault. The main character dodges the attacks and rushes to the exit, shouting that he will be there soon. Mark mentally agrees that it would be better this way because fencing is the main character's hobby. He understands that the man is much stronger than them and has a rank of at least 5. He is as skilled as Professor Jihad, says Iris. Thelma says that according to rumors, the professor can defeat 100 people alone. The heroes decide that if the source of the call is the contract itself, then the chances of tearing it to shreds are extremely small. Besides, the old man wouldn't have given them time for that. They realize that due to the distance they will not be able to get close to the butler. Mars assures the man that they will win anyway. Iris asks the young man to cover for Thelma. The main character was rushing towards the vault. He thinks that Depriving seems to have the same level of skill as his mentor. Iris Dynasty and the guys are unlikely to be able to defeat him, the young man decides. Thoughts are swarming in the young man's head. He is weighing whether they will be able to win if the hero does not release the monster sitting inside him. Nozomu Bounty is afraid that his friends will be afraid of his strength, disown him, and consider him a monster. He thinks that if he shows his friends his power, he will probably be all alone again. The young man curses, realizing what a difficult choice he has to make. Meanwhile, a bloody battle continues in the hall. Mars defends Thelma with all his might from the blows of the blades. Iris rushes at the butler. Each of the heroes is determined and makes every effort to save Somia. Suddenly, Mars Dickens falls exhausted to the floor, severely wounded by one of the blades. He is thrown back a fairly long distance. Thelma realizes that she is left without protection. The butler turns to her and tells her it's time to finish. A loud female scream is heard. Iris screams and turns to Thelma and Mars in horror. A guy and a girl wounded by the butler's blades fall to the ground, making soft moans of pain. The spell falls off the artifact keeper. The monster turns his gaze to the defenseless Somia, who freezes in fear, meeting the eyes of the family. The older sister rushes to the girl's aid, but a stern butler blocks her way, ready to strike another blow with blades. The guardians of the artifact raise their bone spear over the girl's head. The child shrinks from fear. Iris shouts her sister's name again. She closes her eyes, feeling the approach of her death. At this moment, the main character appears on the battlefield. The young man jumps up to the familiar. In a jump, the young man destroys the monster into 2 parts, preventing him from hitting Somia. The bracelet, torn from the girl's hand, is painted in the air. All the witnesses of this scene look with surprise and admiration at the rescue of Iris's younger sister. The bonds fall off the girl's hands. Meanwhile, the hero watches as the remains of the familiar slowly disappear. Samia looks at her savior with admiration and pronounces his name in a trembling voice. The young man realizes that the fight is not over yet and mentally turns to his master, asking what he should do. The main character shields the frightened Somia with his body. He is ready to continue the duel, but this time he decides that, having regained his weapon, he will not be as useless as before. The butler looks at Nozomu Bounty in surprise, and admits that he did not think that the familiar could be defeated so easily with one well-aimed blow of the blade. The man admires the skill of the young man who stands silently in front of him. Thelma and Mark are slowly starting to come to their senses. Mark Dickens chuckles and clears his throat, carefully getting up from the floor. He turns to the main character and with a dismissive clucking of his tongue says that he was late. The young man gives Mark his sword and apologizes to his friend for the delay. Nozomu Bounty looks at the guys who were battered in battle and realizes that in this state Mars Dickens and Thelma Lime, as it seems, are no longer able to fight and hold a punch during a fierce battle. Suddenly, the attention of the main character is attracted by the fragments left over from the bracelet, which come together, forming the same decoration in the air. The bracelet is enveloped in dark energy, which does not allow it to be destroyed. The man says that the purpose of the familiar is to ensure that the agreement is fulfilled at all costs. He explains that as long as the contract is in his hands, the familiar will be reborn over and over again until it fulfills its duty. The main character turns to the butler and asks him if it is true that he is going to take Somia's soul. The man replies that this is exactly the order of his mistress, who sent him on this case. The main character realizes that he knows neither the circumstances nor the responsibilities of the Fransold family who lived 300 years ago. And yet, the young man cannot accept that for a debt that Samia knows nothing about, she will have to pay with her life. Nozomu Bounty says that the only condition of the contract was the return of the crucible of the spiritual flame. However, there was not a word about taking Samia's soul. The young man wonders if this is really fair. The butler replies that he did not know that the crucible had merged with the soul of Lady Samaliana until he saw it in person. He says that he must admit that his mistress is not interested in such conversations at all, because she is waiting for the result. The main character wants to object something, but the man interrupts him and continues. He says that the crucible of the spiritual flame has fused with the soul of Lady Samaliana and can no longer be separated from her. This does not mean that the agreement has become invalid. The butler says that even if his mistress is not interested in him, she will not be silent if the heroes unilaterally violate the mutual agreement. Iris screams at the man that she doesn't care about at all. The girl gets into a combat readiness position to continue fighting and says that she will not give her life to Samia. The butler just frowns. The girl turns to Nozomu Bounty and asks the main character how many times he can use the technique with which he just neutralized the artifact guard. The main character replies that he will reach the limit after a couple of such visits. The girl apologizes and confesses to the young man that she will not be able to defeat the familiar alone. She tells him to destroy the black ball that controls the familiar. The young man believes that they must fight to the very end until they use up all their strength. The girl agrees with him. Both characters arm themselves with swords and head towards the butler to continue the fight. The man says that in his state, strength is valued above all else. It is she who can put an end to an insoluble contradiction. Therefore, if the terms of this agreement do not suit the heroes, then he calls on them to prove that they are stronger than him. A man raises a hurricane of magic and directs it at his friends. Nozomu Bounty rushes towards the butler. Lugato multiplies the number of portals from which he will release blades and directs them towards the main character. The heroes hesitantly stop, gathering their strength to attack the man. He only encourages them, telling them to gather their thoughts as soon as possible. Iris is the first to attempt an attack. The girl dodges all the blades fired at her. At this time, the young man finds himself next to Lugato, raising his sword to attack. The main character crosses swords with the butler. Both men come together in a fierce battle. Nozomu Bounty creates good competition for Lugato as he has excellent fencing skills. They fight almost on equal terms. The hero tries to focus as much as possible on precise movements and not miss more than one butler attack. At some point, the young man discovers that the opponent's movements are becoming too ragged. The main character decides that this is his chance, which he definitely needs to take advantage of. Nozomu Bounty prepares and attacks his opponent. Simultaneously with the attack, the young man dodges the butler's blow. He manages to take the man by surprise but does not injure him. The young man continues to repel the butler's attacks and realizes that he is superior to him in pure fencing. Thanks to an incredible amount of techniques, physical strength, and experience, the man manages to compensate for their difference in skill. The butler again applies one of his techniques and throws the main character away from him like a whirlwind. The young man jumps aside and asks the opponent if there are too many tricks hidden up his sleeve. He continues to create portals for blades and addressing the young man says that he has excellent reflexes, but his techniques apparently leave much to be desired. At this moment, Iris flies up to the man from behind. The girl swings a blade at him and screams that she will not let him take the life of her dear little sister. The man stamps his foot and deftly reflects the lightning attack of the heroine. When the characters cross their swords, there is a grinding and ringing of metal. Lugato's butler notices the main character approaching him, who is preparing to attack the man from the rear. The young man's opponent uses the spell again, but it looks much more powerful than the previous ones. Nozomu Bounty breaks down a solid wall built by his opponent in order to protect himself from attacks for a while, and thereby buy himself time to prepare for the decisive blow. Lugos the butler takes out another edged weapon from the portal. The main character cuts down the wall with a sword in a frenzy. The young man and Iristina utter a war cry and rush to attack the butler who attempted to kill Somia. The man turns out to be faster and more farsighted than he seems. A sword appears in each of his hands, with which he begins to deftly fence and repel the attacks of his opponents. The heroes are trying their best to damage him, but it doesn't work out. The young man is trying to catch his breath and asks his girlfriend how she thinks. Where does such a frail-looking old man get so much strength and energy from? Iris, horrified, asks the main character if the gap in their abilities is really that big. The man doesn't seem to get tired at all. With one deft movement, Lugos the butler throws Nozomu Bounty and Iristina aside like fluff. There is a loud explosion. The main character and his girlfriend find themselves in the very epicenter of this explosion. They stop and catch their breath. Friends are acting all this time without a clear plan, so the attacks are not very coordinated. Nozomu Bounty addresses Iristina by name and asks the girl how many more times she will be able to attack the enemy at her full strength. The girl sighs and says that she will definitely be able to do it once. A plan is maturing in the young man's head. The main character tries to contact his girlfriend with the power of his mind to tell her about his plan so that Lugato does not hear him. At first, the mistress of the castle looks at him with incomprehension. The young man tries to explain the whole essence of his proposed tactics with one glance. Realizing what Nozomu Bounty wants from her, the heroine is surprised and looks at her friend in horror. His plan seems to her very daring and risky. The main character convinces the girl to act according to his plan. The mistress of the castle becomes more confident and determined when she realizes that the young man has an idea with which to overcome the butler. Nozomu Bounty says he starts and commands his girlfriend to get ready to attack the man. She replies that she understood. The heroes decide on a pure adventure and have no idea if their plan will work in life. The young man begins to carry out the plan. He is worried because he understands that without a single training session with Iristina, their chances of winning are significantly reduced. At the same time, he knows that this is their only chance. The main character rushes towards the man. The butler grins and says that the heroes have doomed themselves to certain death because they will not be able to break through his magical charms by force. Iristina gathers the last remnants of her forces in order to make a decisive attack. The mistress of the mansion activates the abyssal roll. This throw is a magic that simulates throwing spears. The girlfriend of the main character decides to bet on Lugato's train of thought and his attempts to predict the actions of his friends attacking him. The girl rushes towards the butler and hopes that he will make a mistake in his calculations, and she will be able to prevail. The man arrogantly says that they released him too early, and if what he sees is really the trump card of the heroes, then they should have waited at least 3 more seconds. He decides that apparently he overestimated the opponents. The main character looks closely at the butler and realizes that his fighting style is very similar to the style of Iristina. Having found this similarity, the young man decides to use this knowledge. The butler is horrified to realize that the heroes have tricked him. The man is a magician and a fighter with excellent physical abilities and many magical techniques in his arsenal. However, since the hero is better at fencing, he is afraid that the young man will engage in close combat with him and forgets about techniques. The young man knows that if Lugato gets into the affected area of his equipment, then this time the butler will have to defend himself from the attacks of the main character. Nozomu Bounty understands this perfectly well, so he tries his best to get him into this zone. The young man crosses eyes with his opponent and mentally tells himself that now everything depends only on himself. At this moment, Iris waits for the right second, and deciding that the time has come, uses the lunar eclipse technique. Iris breaks from her seat and jumps towards the butler. The girl lets out a war cry. The girlfriend of the main character uses her strongest technique, which is a key element of their plan with the young man. Suddenly, the hero freezes in horror. Amazed, they look at the place where the butler used to stand, but they do not see the man himself there. Where did he go? The girl asks the main character. At this moment, a wild scream is heard, and the hero witnesses his girlfriend flying into the air. Unexpectedly for both characters, chains are wrapped around their bodies, preventing their friends from moving. A young man watches in horror and surprise a flock of bats circling around them. Startled by what he sees, he wonders if the butler is really a vampire. The young man can hardly believe it. A flock of bats joins together, once again forming the silhouette of Lugos. The butler says that the hero almost hit him in his attack. The young man knows that there are many different races on the Arkmul continent, but this one has the highest potential among the rest. The butler examines the Metral sword and says that he would not have survived its blow. Metral, filled with magical power, acquires special properties. For example, it becomes a deadly weapon against some races, the main character mentally tells himself. The young man begins to list all the qualities of his opponent, marveling at his incredible physical abilities, enormous magical power, and a long life with a huge range of possibilities. The main character knows that turning into a bat is a unique ability of vampires. In addition, their characteristic feature is their crimson eyes. Apparently, the number of vampires has decreased significantly over the past few centuries, but legends of them still continue to spread across the continent. They say that in one night some vampire turned all the inhabitants of his city into monsters, and another vampire seduced royalty and destroyed entire nations. Because of their peculiarities and the need to drink blood, they are afraid and persecuted. The Dysart Empire was founded by those who were subjected to such persecution in society. At this point, Iris begins to struggle and try to break the bonds. She asks to be released. No matter how hard she tries, the spell still won't break. Meanwhile, the keeper of the artifact is reborn again. The hero realizes that several features of Lugado give him away as a vampire. The young man reproaches himself for not immediately removing the suppression of abilities. In that case, Mars and Thelma would not have suffered so many unnecessary injuries. The main character watches as the keeper of the artifact is about to deal with his girlfriend's younger sister and realizes that everything could have ended differently. The bound girl begs the butler not to do this and stop. She screams at the man to stop bullying her sister. The girl says that if he needs someone's soul, then she is ready to give her own, as long as he does not touch her little sister. However, the butler is adamant. The keeper of the artifact slowly takes out her bright soul from the baby. The main character watches this scene and realizes that he can no longer stay away. Exhausted, Samia casts her last glance in the direction of the young man. Nozomu Bounty suddenly sees a dry old woman with gray hair in front of him and realizes that the heroine can leave him forever. "Not my sister," says the girlfriend of the main character. Samia is the most precious treasure in her life. Her little sister had been giving her the strength to continue living all this time. A desperate girl begs someone to help her. The main character thinks that the master wanted to die herself, and he respected her wish, but now everything is different. The older sister says that she is ready to give anything to save her little sister. The young man also does not want to just watch Samia die in front of his eyes. Iris says she is ready to give even her body or soul. The heroine still hopes that someone will come to her aid. At the same moment, the tortured protagonist makes a great effort and breaks the fetters that bind him. He decides that he should not just give up and must go to the end, protecting a weak girl from an unfair death. A strong vortex is rising in the room. A young man takes up a weapon and prepares for battle. Iris, Thelma, and Mars Dickens look at the main character in amazement. The butler asks himself in horror how to understand this. A guess flashes through the man's mind. Is it really possible, he thinks. The main character is approaching his opponent. The young man is overcome by a whirlwind and anger. The butler realizes that he is in trouble. Nozomu Bounties is preparing to attack. The main character runs around the butler and goes to the keeper of the artifact. The young man frantically waves the ball. Nozomu Bounties cuts the keeper of the artifact into many small pieces. The main character picks up his girlfriend's little sister on his arm and lands. The monster dissipates in the air. The butler looks at this picture in horror, realizing what a difficult situation he found himself in. Iris and the other heroes are watching the opponents in surprise. Iris wonders if the butler doesn't understand what's going on either. Just an incredible amount of Kai admires Thelma. The heroes understand that a simple person cannot have such power. The main character turns around and looks sternly at the butler. The man is frightened by this look, and out of helplessness decides to attack the young man with everything he can. The new bounty calmly watches the bombs flying in his direction. After waiting for some time, the main character takes off. The young man remains unharmed. He heads towards the butler to fight him. He realizes that the young man is too fast. As planned, the man gets into the target area of the main character. The opponents cross swords and converge in battle. The main character confidently holds a sword. The man tells himself that this finger is much stronger than he is. After another attack by a young man, an explosion is heard. Iris realizes that to do this, the main character sent Kai to Katana. The man jumps back, but one of the fragments wounds his face. He activates another spell. The spell causes a bubbling black substance. The main character does not notice this and rushes to the man. He uses his advanced huge jaws of Morrow's technique. The jaws close, but Nozomu Bounty deftly dodges their attack and falls like a stone on his opponent. The butler bounces off the main character. A man and a young man again come together in a duel. The main character strikes with incredible speed and forces the enemy to retreat further and further. The man coughs and grunts. Nozomu Bounty manages to wound his opponent in the leg. He curses in pain and frustration. The main character emits a war cry and lashes out with even greater force at the butler who has lost his grip. The man mentally tells himself that if he gives up, the main character's attacks will become even stronger. The butler decides it's too early to give up. The vampire turns into a flock of bats and begins to circle over the young man, confusing him. Nozomu Bounty only tightens his grip on his weapon and begins to chop the mice in all directions. They simultaneously attack the main character with a whole pack. The young man feels that the main bat is behind him. The main character turns around and strikes at her with a scream. The mouse immediately turns into a butler, who has been hiding all this time in the body of a small animal. The young man stops. The butler looks up at him and crosses eyes with him. The main character looks at him with fury. Nozomu Bounty activates the Phantom Blade technique. The man tries to confront the main character with the help of his magic, but to no avail. The main character rushes towards the butler and, swinging his katana, severely injures his opponent. The man splits into two parts and falls to the floor. The main character is trying to catch his breath after a hard battle. At this time, the soul returns to Samia's body again. Her older sister continues to lie on the floor bound with chains. The young man examines himself and realizes that his uniform is soaked through with blood. He can no longer resist the power of Tiamat that he has decided to unleash. The body is wearing out right before our eyes, Nozomu Bounty notes. The main character hears a girl's scream. Iris hugs her sister and calls her by name. Samia opens her eyes and recognizes her little sister. The mistress of the castle hugs her younger sister to herself and bursts into tears. At this moment, someone in the audience coughs. The young man pays attention to the butler. He tells the main character that a vampire like him will not die until his brain or heart is completely destroyed. The man notices that after all, the blade with which Nozomu Bounty struck him was not made of mithril. The young man brings the blade to the prostrate butler on the floor. He asks him not to worry since the main character has defeated him. That is why the man promises that he will not touch Lady Samaliana. The butler stops talking. Nozomu Bounty leaves him and approaches his friends. The heroes look at their savior with surprise and fear. Suddenly, someone shouts at Nozomu to look back. The hero looks at the sky and freezes. A huge dragon descends in front of the main character. The young man looks closely at the monster and sees that a shock of hair is sticking out between his teeth. The young man realizes that the monster has swallowed up his friends. The main character's breathing quickens. Nozomu Bounty in a frenzy rushes at the dragon, which opens its mouth to meet him. At this moment, the main character jumps up on the bed and wakes up. The young man is breathing heavily and realizes that he had an ordinary nightmare. At this moment, Iris and Somia enter the main character's room. They are happy that Nozomu Bounty has woken up. The younger sister asks if the main character is okay. The young man asks how long he slept. Iristina replies that it's about half a day. She says that they couldn't find a place for themselves when the main character suddenly lost consciousness. He realizes that Lugato was unable to fulfill the condition of the contract, so Samia's soul ceased to be his goal. The man himself returned to his empire and reported the incident to the master. The parts of his body healed very quickly due to the clean cut. After treating their wounds, Thelma and Mars went to the academy, but they will come after class. Iris says that Ina has returned home safely. The girl wants to tell you why her family entered into a secret agreement. She wants everyone to know that. The main character replies that he and his friends will be able to listen to her quite well. At this moment, Nozomu Bounty's stomach is rumbling loudly. The girl giggles. She tells the young man that apparently he is fine. The heroine says she will bring him water and leaves. The girl's younger sister promises the main character that they will be quick. It all started 300 years ago. The heroine begins her story. At that time, there was a civil war of succession in the kingdom of Forsin, plunging the country into real chaos. The direct heirs of the king entered into a struggle with another branch of the family, which was supported by foreign powers. The Fransold family, which belonged to the direct faction, gradually weakened and decided to seek help from their neighbors. The Dizzard family, although they had never had diplomatic relations, secretly using their supernatural abilities and magical items, the Fransold family destroyed the opposing traces. One of these items was the Crucible of the Spiritual Flame, which grants great power at the expense of others. According to the old butler, the head of the Fransold family, out of desperation, concluded a secret agreement for a period of 300 years, because he feared the revival of enemy forces. The girl says that she has already contacted the main house about this issue. Apparently, even the head of the Fransold family was not able to separate this magical object from the soul of Somia. The girl continues. She decides that, most likely, the crucible was there at the behest of the girl's mother. This is due to the fact that the heroine's sister was born prematurely. The main character asks if the girl is sure that she should have told her friends about this. Iris replies that they got their comrades into trouble, but the guys helped them anyway. The girl says she doesn't want to hide anything from her rescuers. She asks them not to worry because the Fransold family won't bother them. The mistress of the estate asks to be allowed to thank the heroes for not letting Somia die. She says she is incredibly grateful to her friends. Somia also joins the conversation and thanks the saviors for saving her life. The characters are surprised by such sincere gratitude. Mars turns to his friend and asks Nozomu Bounty what kind of things he started doing towards the end of the battle. The young man says that he knows that the main character is much stronger than they say about him at the academy, but his power seemed crazy at that time. Nozomu Bounty awkwardly begins his story. The main character says that this is a release from the suppression of abilities. He says that he realized that he was capable of such a thing at the end of his second year of study. He says that he thinks the heroes have seen for themselves that he cannot control his powers. The main character's Kai is constantly at its maximum, so it is simply impossible to contain it. He cannot use such techniques. A young man tells that he once turned a huge boulder into dust. This technique cannot be applied to people. Mars is surprised to ask the main character if all his techniques are deadly. He just laughs. Now Mars Dickens understands how the young man was so badly injured outside the academy. Nozomu Bounty will tell you that he cannot tell you that he is a dragon slayer. The main character remembers that he never gave something to Somia. The young man says that he knows that he is a little late, but he still congratulates the girl on her birthday and gives her a gift. Nozomu Bounty says that he used Somia's bracelet as a sample, but he did the bell for the first time. The main character says he can't call the job good. Somia breaks into a smile and thanks Nozomu Bounty. She says she is very pleased with his gift. The young man smiles back at her and rejoices that he was able to protect his friends.